I am Thaddeus King, 68 years old, and for 40 years I have been a builder. I started with nothing but a secondhand pickup truck and a toolbox that belonged to my father. I poured concrete until my back screamed and negotiated contracts until my voice went hoarse, all to build a kingdom for my family. I thought I was protecting them. I thought I was building a legacy that would stand long after I was gone. I never imagined that the people I invited into my castle were the ones plotting to lock me in the dungeon. After dropping my daughter at the airport for what she claimed was a business trip to Chicago, I received a call that froze the blood in my veins. My housekeeper of 18 years whispered 4 words that shattered my life. Don't come home. But it wasn't until I opened the security app on my phone and saw my wife and son-in-law breaking into my private safe that I realized the true depth of their betrayal. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to erase me completely. Before I tell you what I did next, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. If you have ever had to fight for your own life against the people you love the most, hit like and subscribe. It started this morning at the departure terminal. My daughter Jasmine kissed my cheek, but it felt like the peck of a stranger. She was 32, my princess, the girl I had spoiled since she took her first breath. She told me she was heading to a conference in Chicago. A boring week of seminars, she said. But as the porter loaded her bags, the wind flipped one of the luggage tags. It didn't say O'Hare. It read Mail Maldives, first class. I frowned, about to ask her why she was packing swimwear for a windy city autumn. But she turned away too quickly. I love you, Dad, she said. But she was looking at her phone, typing a message to someone else. Take care of Mom while I am gone. The doors slid shut, separating us. I stood there for a moment, a strange unease settling in my stomach. It was the intuition that had saved me on construction sites 1,000 times. The feeling that the ground beneath my feet was not as solid as it looked. I walked back to my truck, my trusty old Silverado that I refused to trade for the luxury sedans my wife Camille always pushed for. I started the engine and merged onto the highway. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Etta. Etta had been our housekeeper for 18 years. She was the one who remembered my blood pressure medication when I forgot. She was the one who knew how I liked my collard greens. She never called me on my cell unless it was an emergency. I answered, expecting to hear that the boiler had burst or that Camille had slipped on the stairs. Mr. Thad, she whispered. Her voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand her. Where are you? I am on the I-95 Etta, heading home. What is wrong? Don't come home, she hissed. Pull over. Please just pull over. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Etta, talk to me. Is Camille hurt? No, sir. Mrs. Camille is fine. She is in your study with Mr. Hunter. They called a locksmith. They are drilling into your wall safe. The air left my lungs. My study was my sanctuary. No one went in there without my permission, not even Camille. And Hunter, my son-in-law, knew better than to even look at that door. Hunter was a man who smiled too much and worked too little, a real estate agent who spent more time grooming his beard than closing deals. Why were they breaking into my safe? I veered across 2 lanes of traffic, ignoring the honking horns, and screeched into the parking lot of a grocery store. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I killed the engine. They thought I was just an old man who was good with a hammer. They forgot that I spent 4 decades wiring smart homes and installing high-end security systems. Last year, when I started noticing small amounts of cash missing from my wallet, I installed a hidden camera inside the smoke detector in my study. High definition. Audio enabled. Cloud backup. I opened the app on my phone. The screen loaded and the image was crystal clear. There they were. My wife of 40 years, Camille, and Hunter. The room was a mess. Papers were strewn everywhere. A man in blue coveralls was packing a drill into a tool bag. I heard Camille's voice coming through the phone speaker. Thank you. Please send the bill to the office address, not here. The locksmith left. As soon as the door clicked shut, Hunter lunged for the open safe. Look at this, he crowed, pulling out a thick manila envelope. The old man hid the deed right in the back. I zoomed in on the screen. Hunter was sweating, his face flushed with greed. He tossed the deed onto my mahogany desk, the desk my father had built. This house is a gold mine, Camille Hunter said. Once we gentrify the kitchen and knock down these walls, we can list it for $2 million easily. The neighborhood is changing. People will pay a fortune for this much square footage. I watched my wife. Camille looked elegant as always, her pearls shining under the lights, but her eyes were cold. We cannot list it until he is gone. Hunter, she said. He will never sign the papers. He is stubborn as a mule. Hunter laughed. A cruel, ugly sound. That is why we have this. He held up a document. I squinted at the small screen. It was a petition for emergency conservatorship. I turned up the volume. Dr. Rogers signed the affidavit this morning, Hunter said. He certified that Thaddeus is suffering from advanced dementia and is a danger to himself. Once the judge stamps this, you have full control, Camille. You can sign the sale agreement. You can liquidate the accounts. You can do whatever you want. And Thad, Camille asked. She did not sound sad. She sounded impatient. Hunter smirked. I made the arrangements. A van will be here at 6 this evening. We are sending him to the Pines. The Pines. My stomach turned over. The Pines was a state-funded facility on the other side of town. It was a place where people went to be forgotten. It smelled of urine and despair. But we told him we were looking at Silver Pines, Camille said. The luxury resort. We can't afford Silver Pines, Hunter snapped. Not with the debts I have. Besides, he won't know the difference. Once he is medicated, he won't know Tuesday from Sunday. I sat there in my truck, staring at the phone until the screen went dark. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a rage so hot it felt like molten lava. I had built this life for them. I had bought Camille the cars, the jewelry, the vacations. I had welcomed Hunter into my home when he married Jasmine, even though I knew he looked down on us. I had paid off his credit cards twice, and this was my repayment. They were going to declare me insane. They were going to lock me away in a hellhole and sell my legacy to pay for their mistakes. I looked at the rearview mirror. I saw a gray-haired man with wrinkles around his eyes, but I also saw the eyes of the man who had fought his way out of poverty. They thought Thaddeus King was a feeble old man who could be tossed aside like scrap wood. They were about to find out that I was still the foreman of this job site. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going to run. I was going home, and I was going to give them the best performance of my life. I cut the headlights of my Silverado 2 blocks away from the house. It was a trick I learned 40 years ago when I was a young contractor trying to catch guys stealing copper wire from my job sites. The truck was heavy, a steel beast that carried its own momentum. I killed the engine at the top of the gentle slope that led to our driveway. The silence was immediate. The tires crunched softly over the asphalt, a sound barely louder than the wind in the oak trees. I let the truck drift, guiding it with a steady hand until it rolled to a stop right in front of the garage. I didn't slam the door. I didn't click the lock. I just sat there for a moment in the gathering darkness and looked at the house I had built with my own sweat and blood. It was a beautiful house, a 2-story brick colonial that commanded respect on the block. But looking at it now with the knowledge of what was happening inside it, looked like a mausoleum. I took a deep breath. This was it, the most important job of my life. I had to shed the skin of Thaddeus King, the sharp businessman who could calculate the load-bearing capacity of a beam in his head. I had to become the man they wanted me to be. I slumped my shoulders forward, letting my spine curve as if the weight of gravity had finally won. I relaxed the muscles in my face, letting my mouth hang open just a fraction of an inch. I practiced a vacant, watery stare in the rearview mirror. It hurt my pride more than any physical pain I had ever endured. I was a proud man. A black man who had demanded respect in a world that often refused to give it. To voluntarily act weak felt like a betrayal of everything I was. But I did it. I put on the mask of the senile, confused old man. I shuffled up the walkway, dragging my feet just enough to make a scuffing sound. I opened the front door. It wasn't locked. Careless. They were so confident, so arrogant in their crime that they didn't even bother to secure the perimeter. I moved into the foyer. The house was quiet, but it was the heavy, guilty silence of a place holding a secret. I headed straight for the study. The door was ajar. I pushed it open with a trembling hand. The reaction was immediate. It was like turning on the kitchen light and watching roaches scatter. Hunter jumped so hard he nearly knocked over my brass floor lamp. He spun around, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. His hands flew behind his back awkwardly, trying to conceal the thick manila folder he had just pulled from my safe. Camille was no better. She let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her chest. In a pathetic attempt to look busy, she grabbed a feather duster from the shelf and started frantically wiping the air nowhere near any actual furniture. "Thad," she squeaked. Her voice was an octave higher than normal. "You are home! We did not expect you. I thought you were going fishing." I stood in the doorway blinking slowly. I let my eyes drift around the room, sliding over the open safe, the drill on the floor, and the guilty sweat on Hunter's forehead. I looked at them as if I were trying to remember who they were. I let a confused frown settle on my face. "Fishing," I mumbled. My voice was raspy weak. I thought, I do not know. Did I say fishing? I forgot my hat. Or maybe the bait. I cannot recall. Hunter stepped forward. He regained his composure quickly. Too quickly. He was a predator who realized the lion he feared was just an old, toothless dog. He flashed that smile of his, the one that showed too many teeth. He was wearing a slim-fit suit that looked ridiculous on a grown man, the kind of suit he wore to sell overpriced condos to hipsters. "You forgot," Thaddeus Hunter said. He spoke loudly and slowly, enunciating every syllable as if he were talking to a toddler or someone with a severe head injury. "You have been forgetting a lot of things lately, haven't you?" I looked at Hunter. I looked at this mediocre man who had married my daughter. He was a failure in every sense of the word. A real estate agent who couldn't close a deal to save his life. He hated this room. I knew it. I had heard him make snide comments for years. He hated the dark mahogany paneling that lined the walls. He called it oppressive and dated. He wanted to rip it all out. He wanted to paint everything a sterile, soulless white. He wanted to erase the history of this house. He wanted to erase the fact that a black man had built this grandeur. He wanted to gentrify my legacy. He wanted to turn my sanctuary into a blank canvas for his own vanity. The rage boiled in my gut, hot and acidic, but I forced it down. "Where are your keys?" Dad Hunter asked, extending a hand. "You didn't leave them in the truck again, did you?" I reached into my pocket. My hand closed around the heavy ring of keys. I squeezed them until the metal bit into my palm, using the pain to focus. Then I pulled them out. I let my hand shake. I made it tremble violently, a palsy I did not have. The keys jingled like wind chimes. Then I let them slip. They hit the hardwood floor with a loud, jarring clang. I stared down at the keys. I didn't move to pick them up. I just stared at them with a look of helpless confusion. Hunter sighed. It was a loud theatrical sigh meant for Camille's benefit. He looked at my wife and shook his head, a look of mock sympathy on his face. "See, Camille?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It is getting worse. He can't even hold his own keys. It is a safety hazard. What if he tried to drive and dropped them while the truck was moving?" Camille walked over to me. She bent down and picked up the keys. She touched my arm. Her touch used to be the thing that grounded me, the thing that brought me peace after a long day. Now her hand felt like a cold shackle. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "You look exhausted. You are pale. You shouldn't be driving in this condition. Why don't you sit down?" She guided me to the leather armchair in the corner. I sank into it, letting out a groan. Hunter stayed near the desk, effectively blocking my view of the safe and the papers he was hiding. He sat on the edge of my desk, the desk my father had carved. The disrespect was palpable. "Don't worry, old-timer," Hunter said, crossing his arms. "We are going to get you taken care of. Camille and I were just talking about it. You need rest. You need professional help. We found a place that can give you that." "A place," I repeated, keeping my voice dull. "Yes, a wonderful place," Camille chimed in. "Silver Pines. It is like a resort, Thad. They have activities. They have gardens. You would love it." Silver Pines. The lie tasted like ash in the air. I knew about the brochure for the Pines I had seen in the trash earlier that week, the state-funded warehouse for the forgotten. But I nodded slowly like a bobblehead. "I am thirsty," I whispered. "I will get you something," Camille said quickly. She seemed eager to leave the room, eager to get away from the guilt that must have been pricking at the edges of her conscience. "I will make you something refreshing." She hurried out of the study. Hunter stayed. He watched me with the cold, calculating eyes of a butcher sizing up a cow. He didn't think I was a person anymore. I was just an obstacle, an asset to be liquidated. Camille returned a few minutes later. She was carrying a tall glass filled with ice and a pale yellow liquid. Condensation dripped down the sides. "Here, honey," she said, forcing a smile. "I made you some fresh lemonade. Drink it all. It will help you relax." I took the glass. The cold seeped into my fingers. I looked at the lemonade. Camille hated making lemonade. She always complained that squeezing lemons ruined her manicure. She never made it. In 40 years, the only time Camille made strong sugary drinks was when Jasmine was a little girl and refused to take her medicine. She would crush pills into juice or lemonade, adding extra sugar to mask the bitter chemical taste. I looked at the liquid. I could see tiny, undissolved particles swirling at the bottom. It wasn't sugar. I knew what it was. It was the sedatives she took for her anxiety. She had dosed it. She wanted me pliable. She wanted me confused. If I drank this, the act wouldn't be an act anymore. I would be slurring my words and stumbling for real. It would make their story to the paramedics so much more believable. "Thank you, Millie," I said, using a nickname I hadn't used in a decade. She flinched. The guilt flashed across her face for a split second before she smoothed it over. "Drink up, Thad," she urged. I raised the glass to my lips. I let the liquid touch my tongue just enough to taste the overwhelming sweetness and the sharp metallic tang of the drug. I pretended to swallow, making a gulping sound in my throat. "It is good," I said. I stood up, swaying slightly on purpose. I think I will go look at the garden. Just for a minute." Hunter started to protest. He moved to stop me. "Dad, you should stay here." "Let him go," Hunter Camille said sharply. "He is just going to the patio. The fresh air might help the drink work faster." She didn't say the last part, but I heard it. I shuffled toward the French doors that led to the backyard. I pushed them open and stepped out into the humid evening air. I walked slowly, sensing their eyes on my back through the glass. They were watching to see me fall. They were waiting for the old man to collapse. I walked until I was behind the large potted ficus plant in the corner of the patio, out of their direct line of sight. I looked at the lemonade one last time. "Sorry, little tree," I whispered. I poured the entire contents of the glass into the soil. The yellow liquid disappeared into the dark earth. I held the empty glass in my hand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with clear air. They wanted a show. They wanted a confused, medicated old man who couldn't tell Tuesday from Sunday. I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. I wiped my mouth, checked my reflection in the darkened window, and prepared to hit the floor. Dinner that night was a surreal performance of domestic treachery served on fine china. Mrs. Etta had prepared smothered pork chops and collard greens, my favorite meal, but the food turned to sawdust in my mouth. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a table I had crafted with my own hands 30 years ago from a single slab of timber imported from Brazil. It was a masterpiece of joinery and finish solid enough to withstand a hurricane. Now I sat there with a napkin tucked into my collar like a child, my hands trembling deliberately as I lifted a forkful of greens to my mouth. Hunter sat to my right in the seat that should have belonged to my son if I had one, or my daughter if she were here. He was already making himself at home, drinking my best bourbon straight from the bottle as if it were cheap soda. He looked around the dining room with a critical sneer, his eyes darting from the crown molding to the heavy velvet drapes. "You know, Camille," Hunter said, gesturing with his fork, "this place has potential. Great bones. But it is so dark. It feels like a museum. Or a crypt." Camille looked up from her plate. She had barely touched her food. Her guilt was a living thing in the room, making her jumpy. "What do you mean, Hunter?" "It is dated." Hunter continued, his voice loud and brash. "All this dark wood. It is oppressive. When we take over, the first thing we need to do is rip all this paneling out. Open concept. That is what buyers want. We knock down that wall between the kitchen and the dining room. We paint everything white, make it modern, minimalist. It will add at least $200,000 to the asking price." I chewed slowly, keeping my eyes on my plate. My heart hammered a furious rhythm against my ribs. He wanted to paint over the black walnut paneling. He wanted to destroy the architectural details that I had spent years perfecting. This house was not just a structure. It was a testament to how far I had come. It was a monument to black excellence in a neighborhood that had tried to keep us out. And this mediocre man wanted to whitewash it. He wanted to strip it of its soul and turn it into a sterile white box to flip for a quick profit. I let my fork clatter onto the plate. The noise made Camille flinch. I stared at Hunter with a vacant, watery gaze. "Paint," I mumbled. My voice was thick. "You are going to paint the wood." Hunter rolled his eyes at Camille. "See? He is fixated." "Yes, Dad. We are going to paint it. It will look much better. Brighter. You will see." Then he dropped the hammer. He wiped his mouth with one of my linen napkins and leaned back in his chair, the master of a domain he had not earned. Actually, that brings me to something we need to discuss. Jasmine and I talked. Since she is away on business, she is worried about you, Thad, especially after that episode in the study today. You are clearly not safe here alone. Camille nodded eagerly. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin felt dry and cold. He is right, honey. We cannot leave you alone. What if you fall again? What if you forget to turn off the stove? So Hunter said, taking a swig of bourbon. We decided, Jasmine and I are moving in. Temporarily, of course. Just to look after you, until we can get you settled in a facility that can handle your needs. Moving in. They were not waiting for me to die. They were evicting me while I was still breathing. They wanted to occupy my home, drink my liquor, and sleep in my beds while they plotted to lock me away. That is nice, I whispered. Company. I like company. Hunter smirked. Yeah, it will be great, but there is a logistical issue. The stairs, he pointed towards the grand staircase in the foyer. They are a death trap for someone in your condition, Dad. You could slip. You could break a hip. We cannot have that liability. Camille took a deep breath. She squeezed my hand tighter, her nails digging into my skin. We think it is best if you move downstairs, Thad. Just for now. Downstairs. There were no bedrooms downstairs. There was the kitchen, the dining room, the formal living room, and the library. And then there was the back room. It was a converted storage space off the laundry room that I used to store paint cans and extra tiles. It had a small window that looked out onto the AC unit and a concrete floor covered by a thin rug. It was cold. It was small. It was a cell. The back room, I asked. My voice wavered. I let a tear leak from my eye. It was not hard. The betrayal stung like acid. But that is not a bedroom, Millie. That is where I keep the Christmas tree. It is for your own safety, Thad Camille said. Her voice was hard now. She was tired of the pretense. We moved a cot in there this afternoon while you were napping. It is cozy, and it is right next to the back door in case of a fire. We are taking the master suite upstairs. Hunter needs the space to work, and I need to be close to him to help manage your affairs. They were taking my bed, the bed where we had slept for 40 years. The bed where we had made love, where we had whispered secrets in the dark, where we had held each other when we lost our first pregnancy. She was giving it to him. She was letting this parasite sleep in my sanctuary while she banished me to the storage room. I looked at Camille, really looked at her. I searched for the woman I had married, the woman who had stood by my side when we had nothing. I saw only a stranger. A woman consumed by greed and fear, desperate to cling to a lifestyle she could no longer afford. Okay, I said softly. If you think it is best, Hunter said firmly. He stood up. Well, that is settled. Etta, clear the table. I have some calls to make. He walked out of the room without a backward glance, heading straight for my study. My office. His office now. Camille led me to the back room like a child. The cot was narrow and lumpy. The room smelled of detergent and damp concrete. She helped me take off my shoes, her movements brisk and impersonal. Sleep well, Thad, she said. She turned off the light and closed the door. I heard the lock click. I lay there in the darkness for a long time. I listened to the sounds of the house. I heard the floorboards creak overhead as Hunter walked around my bedroom. I heard the television on in the living room. I waited until the house settled into the deep silence of the night. The digital clock on the wall of the laundry room read 2 a.m. I sat up. The confusion vanished from my face like smoke. I stood up and stretched, working the stiffness out of my back. They thought I was trapped. They forgot that I installed that lock myself. It was a simple privacy lock easily popped with a thin piece of wire. I pulled a paper clip from the pocket of my trousers, straightened it, and inserted it into the hole in the doorknob. A soft click, and the door swung open. I moved into the hallway. I didn't need a light. I knew this house better than I knew the lines on my own hand. I avoided the third step on the staircase, the one that always groaned. I bypassed the loose parquet tile in the hallway. I moved like a shadow, silent and lethal. I made my way to the study. A line of light showed under the door. Hunter was still awake. I pressed my ear to the wood, but I heard nothing. He must be reading, or counting his imaginary millions. I needed to get inside. I needed to know exactly what his next move was. I retreated to the kitchen. I found the fuse box in the pantry. I knew exactly which breaker controlled the outlets in the study. I flipped it. From down the hall I heard a curse. Damn it. My charger. I heard the study door open. Heavy footsteps stomped towards the kitchen. I slipped into the shadows of the dining room, holding my breath. Hunter walked past me using the flashlight on his phone. He was muttering to himself, complaining about the old wiring. As soon as he was in the kitchen, I slipped into the study. The room smelled of his cheap cologne and my stale cigar smoke. I moved quickly to the desk. I didn't have much time. I pulled a small black device from my pocket. It was a high-gain listening bug the size of a quarter with a battery life of 3 days. I had bought a box of them years ago for a security job at a bank and never used them. I felt under the heavy oak desk. There was a small lip where the wood joined the frame. I pressed the bug into the corner deep in the shadows where no casual search would find it. It clicked into place magnetically. I heard footsteps returning. I didn't try to leave. I wouldn't make it back to the dining room in time. I ducked behind the heavy velvet curtains of the window, pressing myself flat against the glass. Hunter walked back in. The lights flickered and came back on. "Piece of junk house," he muttered. He sat back down in my chair. The leather creaked under his weight. I heard the tapping of keys on a laptop, then the ringing of a phone. He put it on speaker. "Yeah, what do you want?" a rough voice answered. It sounded like gravel in a blender. "It is me," Hunter said. His voice was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. "Look, Vinny, I need a little more time." "Time is money, Hunter," the voice growled. "You said you would have the cash this week. My boss is getting impatient. He does not like impatient. When he gets impatient, people get hurt." I know, Hunter stammered. "But listen, it is happening. We are moving the old man tomorrow. We got the medical certificate. He is going to the Pines. Once he is in there, I have power of attorney. I can liquidate assets." "We have heard this before, Hunter. This is real Vinny. I am sitting in his office right now. I have the titles right here. Listen, the house will take a month to close, but he has a collection. Classic cars. In the garage. A '69 Mustang. A '57 Chevy. Mint condition. I can move those fast. Cash buyers. I will have your 50 grand by the weekend. I promise. 50 grand. My hands curled into fists at my sides. He owed $50,000 to loan sharks. And he was going to sell my babies. My cars. I had restored that Mustang bolt by bolt. It was my pride and joy. He was going to sell it for scrap value to save his own skin. "You have until Friday," Hunter Vinny said. "After that we come to the house. And we take what we are owed, plus interest. In blood." The line went dead. I heard Hunter exhale a long, shaky breath. I heard the clink of glass on glass as he poured himself another drink. "Do not worry, old man," he whispered to the empty room. "You will not need a car where you are going. You will not need anything." I waited until he left the room, probably to go upstairs and sleep in my bed. I waited 10 minutes to be safe. Then I slipped out from behind the curtain. I retrieved the bug, activated it to record mode, and placed it back. Then I ghosted back to my cell in the laundry room. I lay down on the cot, but I didn't sleep. My blood was boiling. He was going to sell my cars. He was going to gut my house. He was going to throw me into a pit and let me rot. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over. But as I stared up at the dark ceiling, I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Hunter had just made a fatal mistake. He had told me his deadline. Friday. I had 3 days. 3 days to turn the tables. 3 days to orchestrate their downfall. I closed my eyes. The performance was over for the night. Now it was time to work. The morning sun filtered through the small, high window of the storage room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My back ached from the thin cot, a sharp reminder of my new status in my own home. I was no longer the master of the house. I was the unwanted guest, the problem to be managed. I sat up slowly, rubbing the grit from my eyes. I could hear them in the kitchen. The clatter of silverware, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of voices. It sounded like a normal family breakfast, the kind we used to have on Sunday mornings. But I knew better. It was a war council. I shuffled out of my cell, putting on my mask of confusion. I let my mouth hang slightly open, my eyes unfocused. I walked into the kitchen. Hunter was sitting at the head of the table reading the financial section of the newspaper, my newspaper. He was wearing a silk robe that I had bought for myself 5 years ago and never worn. Camille was at the stove flipping pancakes. She didn't look at me. "Good morning, Thad," Hunter said without looking up. "Did you sleep well in your new room?" I grunted a non-committal sound that could mean anything. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Camille placed a plate of dry toast and a hard-boiled egg in front of me. No pancakes. Pancakes were for the people in charge. "Eat up," she said briskly. "We have a busy day. The van will be here at 6. I picked up the toast with a trembling hand. I took a small bite, chewing slowly. My eyes darted around the room. Mrs. Etta was by the sink washing dishes. Her back was stiff, her shoulders hunched. She knew. She saw everything. In 18 years she had become part of the woodwork invisible to people like Hunter and Camille, but she saw everything. Hunter stood up, wiping his mouth. "I am going to the club for a few hours, Camille. I need to meet some potential buyers for the cars. Make sure he is ready when the transport arrives." "I will," Camille said. Hunter left the room. I heard the front door close. Camille sighed a sound of heavy exhaustion and wiped her hands on her apron. "I am going to take a shower," she said to the air. "Etta, watch him. Do not let him wander off." "Yes, ma'am," Etta said softly. As soon as Camille was gone, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. Etta turned off the faucet. She dried her hands on a towel and walked over to the trash compactor. She pulled out a black plastic bag. It was heavy, bulging with refuse. She walked over to me, her face a mask of professional servitude, but her eyes were burning with urgency. "Mr. Thad," she whispered, "I was cleaning the study this morning. Mrs. Camille told me to shred everything in the bin, but the shredder was jammed. She told me to just bag it and take it to the curb." She placed the heavy bag at my feet. "I think you need to see what is in here," she said. "I put some of your old magazines on top to hide it. Take it to your room." "Thank you, Etta," I whispered. She squeezed my shoulder, a brief, firm touch of solidarity. Then she went back to the sink. I dragged the bag back to the storage room. It was heavy, laden with the weight of my life being dismantled. I locked the door with the paperclip I kept in my pocket. I sat on the floor and tore open the plastic. Coffee grounds, apple cores, and crumpled papers spilled out. The smell was sour, but I didn't care. I sifted through the garbage like a prospector panning for gold. I found them. Dozens of sheets of paper torn into quarters and eighths. Camille had been lazy. She hadn't shredded them. She had just ripped them up, assuming that a senile old man would never have the patience or the cognitive ability to piece them back together. I cleared a space on the concrete floor. I pulled a roll of blue painter's tape from the shelf where I kept my supplies. I started to work. It was a puzzle, a jigsaw of betrayal. My hands, usually steady with a hammer, were shaking with rage, but I forced them to be still. I matched edges. I aligned text. I taped the pieces together one by one. The first document that took shape was a draft, a legal filing. My eyes scanned the header: petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce papers. Camille wasn't just planning to lock me away. She was planning to divorce me the moment I was declared incompetent. I read the clauses. She was asking for everything: the house, the alimony, the full control of the marital assets. She cited irreconcilable differences in spousal incapacity. She was going to divorce me while I rotted in a state facility. She wanted to cut the last tie so she could enjoy the money without the guilt of being married to the man she had destroyed. 40 years. 40 years of building a life, of raising a child, of burying parents. And she threw it all away for a condo on the beach and a younger lover she probably hadn't met yet. I pushed the divorce papers aside. I felt a cold knot in my chest, a hardness that hadn't been there before. The grief was gone. There was only room for strategy now. I pieced together the second document. It was handwritten on a notepad from a hotel. It was a breakdown, a math problem. I recognized Hunter's jagged, aggressive handwriting. Sale of King Construction, $15 million. Sale of house, $2.5 million. Liquid assets, $1.2 million. Total, $18.7 million. Below that there was a split. Hunter 60%, Jasmine 40%. Camille $5,000 monthly stipend plus condo fees. I stared at the numbers. Hunter wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from Camille too. He and Jasmine were cutting her out. They were going to give her a stipend, an allowance, like a child. She was selling her husband down the river for a monthly check that Hunter would probably cancel the moment the money was secure. They were sharks eating sharks. I swept the papers into a pile and hid them under the mattress of the cot. I needed to know the status of my money. The liquid assets Hunter had listed. That was my operating capital, my retirement fund, the money I used to pay the bills and the crew. I pulled my iPad from beneath the pile of drop cloths in the corner. I had hidden it there weeks ago when I started suspecting things. I powered it on, keeping the brightness low. I connected to the neighbor's Wi-Fi network, which I had helped set up a year ago. I didn't trust my own network anymore. Hunter was tech-savvy enough to monitor the traffic. I opened the banking app. I typed in my username and password. My fingers flew across the glass. Access denied. I frowned. I retyped it. Careful this time. Access denied. Contact administrator. My heart began to hammer. I closed the app and opened the browser. I went to the bank's website. I tried to log in there. Same message. I reached into my sock and pulled out the burner phone I had bought. I dialed the number for the bank's private client services. I knew the number by heart. First National Bank, this is Sarah speaking. How can I help you, Sarah? Good. I knew Sarah. I had sent her a gift basket when her daughter was born. Sarah, this is Thaddeus King. I am having trouble accessing my accounts online. It says access denied. There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Oh, Mr. King, hello? Let me check that for you. One moment. The silence stretched. It was heavy and ominous. Mr. King, Sarah said, her voice different now. Formal. Guarded. I see a note here on your file. Your access credentials were revoked this morning. Revoked. By whom? It is my account, Sarah. I understand that, sir. But we received a legal notification, an emergency conservatorship order. It was filed along with a medical certificate of incapacity, your wife, Mrs. Camille King, has been granted temporary power of attorney over all accounts. She came in this morning and changed the security keys. The room spun. They had moved faster than I thought. They already had the accounts. They had cut off my supply lines. Sarah, listen to me. I am not incapacitated. I am talking to you right now. I am sound of mind. This is fraud. You have to freeze those accounts. I cannot do that, Sir, Sarah said. Her voice was apologetic but firm. The medical certificate is valid. It is signed by a licensed physician. We have to follow the protocol. If you want to contest it, you will need to file a counter motion with the court. But as of right now, Mrs. King is the only authorized user. I gripped the phone until the plastic creaked. Who signed it, Sarah? Who is the doctor? I am not supposed to give out that information over the phone, sir. Sarah, please. I have banked with you for 30 years. Who signed the death warrant on my life? There was a hesitation. Then a sigh. It was Dr. Silas Rogers. The name hit me like a physical blow. Silas Rogers. I dropped the phone onto the blanket. I sat back against the cold wall of the storage room and closed my eyes. Silas Rogers was not just a doctor. He was a man I had saved. 10 years ago, Silas was a brilliant physician who had lost his way in a bottle of vodka. He had lost his practice, his wife, and his dignity. I found him sleeping in his car on one of my construction sites. Instead of calling the police, I took him to a hotel. I paid for his rehab. I paid off his debts so he could get his medical license reinstated. I helped him rebuild his life because I believed in second chances. I believed that a man was more than his worst mistake. And this was how he repaid me. He signed a piece of paper declaring me incompetent. He sold me out to Hunter and Camille. He used the very license I helped him save to take away my freedom. The betrayal was total. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law. And now the man I had pulled from the gutter. There was no one left. The circle was closed. They had the money. They had the legal authority. They had the house. And in 6 hours, they would have my body in a van headed for a place from which there was no return. I looked at the shredded papers on the floor. I looked at the dark screen of the iPad. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. The time for sentiment was over. The time for being the benevolent patriarch was gone. They had stripped me of my roles, husband, father, friend, but they forgot one thing. They forgot that before I was any of those things, I was a builder. And a builder knows that before you can erect a new structure, you have to demolish the old one. You have to strip it down to the foundation. You have to tear out the rot. I stood up. I reached under the cot and pulled out the small fireproof box I had hidden there. It contained the one thing they hadn't found, the one thing that wasn't digital, the one thing that Silas Rogers couldn't touch. I checked my watch. It was noon. The van was coming at 6. I had 6 hours. 6 hours to turn this storage room into a command center. 6 hours to lay the charges that would bring their whole world crashing down. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway. The house was quiet. I walked towards the kitchen, my step heavy, my face blank, but inside I was already pouring the concrete for their prison. I wasn't going to the Pines, and I wasn't going down without a fight that would shake the foundations of this family forever. The sound of a car engine cutting in the driveway pulled me from my thoughts. It was the distinct throaty purr of the Jaguar F-Type I had bought for Jasmine on her 30th birthday. My pulse quickened. She was supposed to be in Chicago at a conference for the next 5 days. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 in the afternoon. It had only been 48 hours since I dropped her at the airport. Why was she back? I stayed on my cot in the storage room listening. The front door opened. The click of high heels on the hardwood floor echoed through the house. "Mom, Hunter, I am home." It was Jasmine. Her voice was tight, high-pitched with stress. I heard Camille rush from the kitchen to meet her in the foyer. "Baby, you are back early. What happened? Did the conference end early?" Jasmine sighed a long, dramatic exhalation that I knew well. "It was canceled, Mom." A pipe burst in the convention center. Can you believe it? The whole thing was a wash. I caught the first flight back. It was a nightmare. I stood up slowly and moved to the crack in the door. I had a direct line of sight to the hallway. Jasmine was standing there dropping her Louis Vuitton bags on the floor. She looked anything but stressed. She looked radiant. Her skin, usually a light caramel, was now a deep, rich bronze. There were distinct tan lines on her shoulders where her sundress straps had been. Her hair was lighter bleached by the sun. She smelled of coconut oil and sea salt, not the stale air of a convention center in Illinois. She had been in the Maldives. She had lied to my face, taken a vacation while her mother and husband plotted to lock me away, and now she was back early. Hunter came out of the study. He kissed her on the cheek, but his eyes were darting around nervously. "Did you bring it?" he whispered. Jasmine tapped her purse. "It is in here. The transfer documents for King Construction. We need his signature today, Hunter. The buyers are getting restless." Hunter nodded. He gestured towards the storage room. "He is in there. We have the doctor coming in an hour to certify him. Once Dr. Evans signs off, we can guide his hand on the signature line, and it won't matter if he knows what day it is." Jasmine looked at the closed door of my cell. Her expression softened for a second, a flicker of the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I read blueprints. But then it hardened into something cold and mercenary. "Let me talk to him first," she said. "I need to get something from him." She walked towards my room. I scrambled back to the cot and sat down, hunching my shoulders, letting my mouth hang slack. I stared at a spot on the wall, emptying my eyes of all intelligence. The door opened. Jasmine stepped in. She brought the scent of the tropics into the dusty, stale air of the storage room. "Daddy," she cooed. I looked up slowly, blinking as if I didn't recognize her at first. "Jasmine," I rasped. "You are back. Chicago. Was it cold?" She froze for a second, glancing at her tanned arms, but she recovered quickly. "Yes, Daddy. It was freezing. Terrible weather. I missed you so much." She rushed forward and threw her arms around me. It should have been a warm reunion. It should have been a daughter comforting her ailing father. But as she hugged me, I felt her hands. They weren't patting my back in comfort. They were sliding down my sides. She was patting me down. Her fingers dipped into the pockets of my trousers. She checked the inside pocket of my cardigan. She was looking for something specific. I sat still, letting her violate my dignity. I knew exactly what she was looking for. The Black Centurion card. The card with the unlimited limit. The card that paid for her Jaguar and her condo and her lifestyle. I had kept it in my wallet for years, but this morning, sensing the shark circling, I had taken it out. It was currently tucked beneath the orthopedic insole of my right shoe. "Daddy, where is your wallet?" she whispered, pulling back slightly but keeping her hands on my chest. "I want to buy you some ice cream. You love ice cream, don't you?" "Ice cream?" I repeated, smiling vacantly. "Strawberry. Yes, strawberry. But I need your card, Daddy. The black one. Do you remember where you put it?" I frowned, pantomiming deep thought. I patted my empty pockets. "Gone," I said. "I think. The squirrels took it. They live in the walls, Jasmine. They take everything." Jasmine stood up, frustration radiating off her in waves. She smoothed her dress, her eyes scanning the room, looking for a wallet on the cot or the floor. "There are no squirrels, Dad," she snapped, her mask slipping. "God, this is useless." She turned to the door. "Hunter!" she yelled. "He does not have it. He must have lost it." Hunter appeared in the doorway. He looked at me with disgust. "It does not matter, Jazz. Once we have the power of attorney, we can order a replacement. We just need the signature on the sale documents. The doctor is here." The doctor. This was the next act in their tragedy. A heavy-set man in a rumpled suit squeezed into the small room. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a man who spent his nights at the racetrack. His nose was bulbous and red, and he smelled of peppermint trying to cover up the sour reek of gin. This was Dr. Evans. He wasn't my doctor. He wasn't Dr. Sterling. He was a hired gun, a man willing to sell his medical ethics for an envelope of cash. Mr. King. Dr. Evans boomed his voice too loud in the small space. I am Dr. Evans. I am here to have a little chat with you, just to see how you are doing. He pulled a metal folding chair from the corner and sat down opposite me. Hunter and Jasmine stood behind him, arms crossed, watching like vultures. I looked at Dr. Evans with wide, fearful eyes. Are you the mechanic? I asked. My truck is making a noise. A clunking noise. Dr. Evans chuckled, a wet rattling sound. He glanced back at Hunter. Classic disorientation, he muttered. He turned back to me. No, Thaddeus. I am a doctor. Can you tell me what year it is? This was it. The test. If I answered correctly, I could fight them. I could prove I was sane. But if I proved I was sane, they would stop the legal process and find another, more permanent way to get rid of me. They would push me down the stairs. They would overdose my medication. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to feel safe enough to sign the papers that would incriminate them forever. I scrunched up my face. I looked at my hands. The year, I mumbled. It is. It is the year of the tiger. No. Wait. It is 1974. Nixon is in trouble. I saw it on the news. Hunter let out a short, sharp laugh. 1974. Did you hear that, doctor? He thinks Nixon is president. Dr. Evans nodded, scribbling furiously on a clipboard. Severe cognitive regression, he muttered. Disconnected from temporal reality. Thaddeus, can you tell me who these people are? He pointed to Jasmine and Hunter. I looked at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to ride a bike. I looked at the man she had married, the man who was destroying her soul. That is the lady from the TV, I said, pointing to Jasmine. The weather lady. And him. He is the tax man. I paid my taxes. You cannot take my truck. I started to get agitated, rising from the cot, waving my hands. Get out, I shouted, letting my voice crack. Get off my job site. I paid my taxes. Thaddeus, calm down, Dr. Evans said, standing up and backing away. He is aggressive, Hunter noted, sounding pleased. He gets violent when he is confused. That is why we need the emergency order. Dr. Evans closed his folder. I have seen enough. The patient demonstrates advanced dementia, paranoia, and an inability to recognize immediate family members. He is a danger to himself and others. I will sign the certificate of incapacity immediately. You should have the guardianship papers ready for the judge by the morning. Thank you, Dr. Jasmine said. Her voice was relieved. You are saving his life. They all filed out of the room. Hunter stayed behind for a second. He looked at me huddled on the cot, trembling with fake fear. 1974, he whispered, shaking his head. You had a good run, old man. But it is over. He closed the door. He didn't lock it this time. Why would he? I was a senile old man who thought it was the 70s. I wasn't a threat. I waited until their footsteps faded down the hall towards the kitchen. I needed to know what they were doing next. I needed to know why Jasmine was so desperate. I stood up, shedding the tremors, and moved to the door. I opened it a crack. The house was quiet, but I could hear hushed voices coming from the kitchen. I slipped off my shoes. I moved down the hallway in my socks, avoiding the creaky floorboards. I stopped just outside the kitchen entrance, pressing my back against the wall. You have to sign the sale agreement, as his guardian Jasmine was saying. Her voice was a hiss of panic. We cannot wait for the court to stamp it. The buyers from Apex Corp are coming tomorrow at 9. If we show them the doctor's certificate, they will accept your signature. I don't know, Jazz Hunter said. That is risky. If the court finds out we sold the company before the guardianship was official. We don't have a choice, Hunter, Jasmine snapped. The sound of a glass slamming onto the counter echoed. I got a call when I landed. They know I am back. Who knows, Hunter asked. The casino, Jasmine whispered. The owners. I owe them, Hunter. I owe them big. I held my breath. I knew she liked to gamble. I knew she took trips to Vegas, but I thought it was slots and blackjack tables. I thought it was recreational. How much, Jasmine, Hunter asked. His voice was low, dangerous. Jasmine started to cry, soft, hitching sobs. 400,000, she choked out. Hunter swore. A long string of profanities. 400,000. How is that even possible? I tried to win it back, she sobbed. I lost 50,000 on the first night in Maldives. I thought I could double down. I kept doubling down. They gave me a line of credit because they know who my father is. They know Thaddeus King is good for it. But when I tried to leave, they stopped me. They said if I don't wire the money by Friday, they are going to send someone. They said they are going to cut off my fingers, Hunter, one by one. The horror of it washed over me. My daughter wasn't just greedy. She was an addict. She had gambled away a fortune on the promise of my name. She was selling my life's work, my company, to save her own skin from mobsters. We sell the company tomorrow, Hunter said. His voice was steely now. 15 million. We pay off the sharks. We pay off my loans. And we put the rest in an offshore account where the courts cannot touch it. But we have to move fast. If Thaddeus wakes up, if he has a moment of clarity and calls his lawyer, we are dead. He won't wake up. Jasmine sniffled. Mom gave him a double dose in that lemonade. He poured it in the plant, but he drank enough to be out of it. And Dr. Evans said he is gone. His mind is mush, Good Hunter said. Now clean yourself up. We have to celebrate. We are going to be rich, baby. Filthy rich. I heard the sound of a cork popping. Champagne. They were drinking champagne in my kitchen while discussing the dismemberment of my empire. I backed away slowly. My heart was heavy, but my mind was sharp as a razor. $400,000, gambling debts, loan sharks. It was all the leverage I needed. They were terrified. They were desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. I crept back to the storage room. I retrieved my burner phone from my sock. I needed to make a call. Not to the police. Not yet. I needed to call Mr. Stein. My lawyer, the man who had helped me set up the irrevocable trust 3 years ago, the trust that Hunter and Jasmine didn't know existed. I dialed the number. Mr. Stein, I whispered when he answered. It is Thaddeus. Initiate Protocol Omega. They are selling the company tomorrow morning. I heard Stein inhale sharply on the other end. Are you safe, Thaddeus? I am in the belly of the beast, I said. But I have the knife. Be ready. Tomorrow morning at 9, bring the sheriff. I hung up. I sat on the cot and listened to the clink of champagne glasses from the kitchen. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow the hangover would be lethal. The single bulb in the ceiling of the storage room flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the cinder block walls. I sat on the edge of the cot, my hands clasped between my knees to stop them from shaking. It was not fear that made them tremble. It was adrenaline. It was the cold, hard realization that the people I had loved for 40 years were not just thieves. They were executioners. I had heard their plan. I knew what was coming. And I knew that this next hour would be the most dangerous hour of my life. If I made one mistake, if I flinched at the wrong moment, if my breathing betrayed me, I would not be waking up in a hospital or a prison cell. I would be waking up in a pine box. Or worse, I wouldn't wake up at all. The door handle turned slowly. I slumped my shoulders, letting my jaw go slack, resuming the mask of the confused old man. Camille stepped into the room. She was holding a steaming mug of tea. Her hands were steady, her face composed in a mask of loving concern that made my stomach turn. She was wearing a silk blouse and pearls, dressed for a funeral she was trying to hasten. "Thad, honey," she said softly, "I brought you some tea. It is chamomile. It will help you sleep before the transport arrives." I looked up at her. I searched her eyes for any trace of the woman I had married, the woman who had nursed me through pneumonia, the woman who had cried with me when we buried my mother. I saw nothing. Her eyes were flat, opaque, reflecting only her own greed and desperation. She was not looking at her husband. She was looking at a loose end that needed to be tied up. "Tea," I mumbled, reaching out with a trembling hand. "I like tea. Is it sweet?" "Very sweet," she promised. "Just the way you like it." She placed the mug in my hands. The heat seeped into my cold fingers. I brought it to my nose, pretending to savor the aroma. The steam hit my face, and with it came a smell that triggered a 40-year-old memory. It was faint, masked by the heavy scent of honey and chamomile, but it was there. A sharp chemical tang. Bitter almonds. Solvent. I knew that smell. When I was starting out in construction, we used a specific type of industrial stripper to remove old varnish from floors. It was toxic stuff. We had to wear respirators. One of my guys took his mask off for 5 minutes and passed out cold. The doctor said it attacked the central nervous system. It shut down the brain's ability to regulate breathing. It wasn't just a sedative. It was a chemical cocktail meant to knock a horse unconscious. If a man my age with a heart condition drank this whole cup, he wouldn't just sleep. He would go into respiratory arrest. They weren't trying to sedate me. They were trying to kill me. And if I died, well, it would just be a tragic accident. The poor, confused old man had a heart attack in his sleep. I looked at Camille over the rim of the mug. She was watching me intently, her breath held in her throat. She wanted me to drink it. She needed me to drink it. "It smells funny, Millie," I said, wrinkling my nose. "It is just a new brand, Thad," she said quickly. Her voice was tight. "Please, drink it. It will make you feel better." I raised the mug to my lips. I took a small sip, letting the hot liquid pool under my tongue. It burned. It tasted like battery acid and sugar. I held it there, fighting the urge to gag. I started to cough, a dry, hacking cough that shook my whole body. "Hot," I choked out. "Too hot." I grabbed the handkerchief from my pocket and pressed it to my mouth, pretending to wipe away spittle. I spat the liquid into the cloth, folding it quickly to hide the stain. I did it again. Another cough. Another spit. I dropped the mug. It hit the concrete floor and shattered. The brown liquid splashed over my shoes and the hem of Camille's expensive trousers. "Oh, Thad," she cried, jumping back. "Look what you have done." I didn't answer. I let my eyes roll back in my head. I let my body go limp. I slid off the cot, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. I convulsed once, twice, jerking my limbs like a marionette with cut strings. Then I went still. I lay on the cold concrete, my face pressed against the rough surface. I slowed my breathing. Shallow. Irregular. I focused on the beat of my own heart, willing it to be calm. Thad Camille screamed. It was a scream of panic, but not the panic of a grieving wife. It was the panic of an accomplice who thinks the plan has gone wrong. "Thad, wake up." I heard running footsteps, heavy boots, Hunter, and the click of heels. Jasmine. They burst into the room. "What happened?" Hunter shouted. "He drank it," Camille stammered. "He took a sip, and then he just fell." Is he dead?" Hunter dropped to his knees beside me. He didn't check for a pulse. He didn't put his ear to my chest. His hands went straight to my pockets. He rolled me over roughly, jamming his hands into my trousers, my jacket, my shirt. He was searching me. He was violating my body, looking for the one thing he hadn't found. "Where is it?" he hissed. "Where is the key to the private vault?" He ripped the pocket of my cardigan. He tore the button off my shirt. He patted down my socks. He was frantic. "It has to be here," Jasmine shrieked. She was kneeling on the other side of me, going through my pockets again, her long nails scratching my skin. "He always keeps it on him. He never takes it off. Check his neck," Hunter ordered. "Maybe it is on a chain." Jasmine yanked at my collar, popping the top button. She felt around my neck. "Nothing." "It is not here," she cried. "He must have hidden it." "God, Hunter, if we don't find that key, we can't get the gold bars. We can't pay the sharks." Hunter stood up and kicked the cot. "Damn it. The old bastard hid it. He knew. He must have known." He looked down at me. I lay perfectly still, seeing him through the slit of my eyelids. His face was twisted in a rictus of hate. "Is he breathing?" Camille asked. Her voice was trembling. "Hunter, check if he is breathing. We cannot have a dead body here before the van arrives. That complicates everything." Hunter crouched down again. He put his hand over my mouth. I held my breath. My lungs burned. My chest screamed for air. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Barely," he said, standing up. "His breathing is shallow. He is deep under. That dose knocked him out cold. He is not waking up anytime soon. Maybe never." "Good," Jasmine said. Her voice was cold steel. "If he dies, it solves all our problems. We don't have to pay for the nursing home." Camille let out a small sob. It sounded like regret. I waited. I waited for her to say something. I waited for her to say, "Call an ambulance." I waited for her to say, "This has gone too far." I waited for the woman I loved to surface from beneath the layers of greed. "Hunter, be careful," she whispered. "Don't be too rough with him. He is hurt. He is dying, Camille." Hunter snapped. "Look at him. He is a vegetable. Who cares if he is hurt? He is not a person anymore. He is a problem. And we need to solve it. We need to find that key before they take him away. Once he is in the pines, his personal effects become property of the state. We have to strip him now." I lay there and waited for Camille to fight back. I waited for her to slap him. I waited for her to scream, but there was only silence. A long, heavy, suffocating silence. And in that silence, 40 years of marriage died. It didn't die with a bang or a shout. It died with a whimper. It died because she said nothing. She stood there and watched her son-in-law scavenge the body of her husband, and she said absolutely nothing. That silence broke me more than the fall from a scaffold ever could. It broke my heart into pieces so small they could never be put back together. "Strip him," Hunter ordered Jasmine. "Check the lining of his clothes. Check his shoes. Check everything." I felt Jasmine's hands on me again. She pulled off my shoes. She tore the insoles out. She found the black credit card I had hidden there. I found the card. She shouted triumphant. "The Centurion," Great Hunter said. "That helps. But we need the key. Keep looking." They stripped me down to my undershirt and boxers. They left me shivering on the cold concrete floor. They tore apart my clothes, ripping the seams, checking every inch of fabric. They found nothing else. The key to the private vault, the key to the safety deposit box where I kept the gold and the bearer bonds, was taped to the underside of the toilet tank in the master bathroom. A trick I learned from an old mob movie. They would never find it. "He doesn't have it," Jasmine said, throwing my torn trousers onto the floor. "He must have buried it in the yard or hidden it in the attic. We will have to tear this house apart to find it." "We will," Hunter said grimly. "We will rip up every floorboard if we have to. But first, we need to get rid of him. The van will be here in 20 minutes. Get him dressed. Put some sweatpants on him. Make him look presentable." They wrestled me into a pair of old sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. They didn't bother to be gentle. They treated me like a sack of cement. They dragged me up onto the cot. "What do we tell the driver?" Camille asked. She sounded ghost-like, hollow. "We tell him the truth," Hunter said. "Or a version of it. We tell him the patient had a severe episode. He became aggressive. We had to sedate him for his own safety. He is unresponsive, but stable. They won't ask questions. The Pines isn't a hospital. It is a holding pen. As long as the check clears, they don't care if he arrives in a coma or in a straitjacket." "Are we calling an ambulance?" Camille asked weakly. "No." Hunter barked. "No ambulance. Ambulances mean paramedics. Paramedics mean police reports. They mean toxicology screens. If they test his blood and find the cocktail you mixed, we are all going to jail for attempted murder. We use the private transport service I hired. They are discreet. They are paid to look the other way." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Yeah, this is King. Is the van close?" "Good. Pull around to the back. We will bring him out through the kitchen. He is sedated." "Yeah, heavy. Just get here." He hung up. "It is done," he said. 20 minutes. And then he is gone. He looked down at me one last time. "You should have just died, old man," he whispered. "You should have just had the decency to die and leave us the money. You made this hard." They left the room. They turned off the light, plunging me back into darkness. I heard the lock click. I lay there in the dark, my body aching, my heart frozen. I felt the cold concrete seeping into my bones. They thought I was in a coma. They thought I was helpless. They thought they had won. But as I lay there listening to the sound of my own shallow breathing, I felt a new sensation. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, hard resolve. They had stripped me of my clothes. They had stripped me of my dignity. They had stripped me of my family. But they hadn't stripped me of my mind. And they hadn't found the phone. I reached down into the sock on my left foot, the one place they hadn't checked. I felt the hard rectangular shape of the burner phone. It was small, old-fashioned, and robust. I pulled it out. The screen glowed in the darkness, a beacon of hope. I had 20 minutes. 20 minutes before the van arrived. 20 minutes to make the call that would end this charade. I didn't call the police. The police were a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed someone who could operate outside the lines, someone who knew the law better than the judges, and someone who hated bullies as much as I did. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. It rang once. Twice. Stein, a voice answered. It was crisp, sharp, and alert. "Mr. Stein," I whispered. My voice was raspy from the fake coughing, but steady. "It is Thaddeus," Thaddeus Stein said. His tone changed instantly. He went from lawyer to warrior. "Where are you?" "You missed our lunch meeting." "I am home," I said. "In the storage room." They drugged me. They are sending me to the Pines in 20 minutes. Private transport. No ambulance. There was a silence on the other end, a silence that was heavy with understanding and fury. Did they sign the papers? Stein asked. Yes. Dr. Evans and Rogers. They have the guardianship. They are selling the company tomorrow. Jasmine is back. She owes $400,000 to the mob. Okay, Stein said. Listen to me carefully, Thaddeus. Do not fight them. Get in the van. Let them take you. What? I hissed. You want me to go to that hellhole? Yes, Stein said. Because that is the trap. If you fight now, it is a domestic dispute. It is your word against theirs, and they have a doctor's note. But if they transport you across city lines against your will, based on fraudulent medical documents, and admit you to a facility under false pretenses, that is kidnapping. That is federal. That is the end of them. I closed my eyes. It was a gamble. A massive, terrifying gamble. Are you sure, Stein? I am sure. I will have a team on your tail the second that van leaves your driveway. I will have eyes on you the whole way, and when you get there, I will be waiting. With the sheriff. And a federal warrant. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. Initiate Protocol Omega. They have crossed the red line. Protocol Omega. Stein repeated. It is done. Stay safe, my friend. See you on the other side. The line went dead. I shoved the phone back into my sock. I lay back down on the cold floor and closed my eyes. I slowed my breathing again. I waited for the sound of the van. I was going to the Pines. I was going to hell. But I was bringing the devil with me. I woke up to the smell of ammonia and boiled cabbage. It was a thick, suffocating stench that coated the back of my throat. My head was pounding a rhythmic thudding behind my eyes that synchronized with the fluorescent hum of the light fixture above me. I blinked, trying to clear the grit from my vision. I was not in the storage room anymore. I was not in my house. I was lying on a mattress that felt like it was stuffed with old newspapers covered by a sheet so thin I could see the stains on the ticking beneath it. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy leaden. The chemical cocktail Camille had fed me was still working its way through my system. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I needed oxygen. I needed clarity. I looked around. The room was a concrete box painted a Depression-era green. There was a single window high up on the wall covered by a heavy wire mesh. No curtains, no view. Just a square of gray light fading into darkness. This was not Silver Pines. Silver Pines had mahogany reception desks and nurses who smiled. This place had linoleum floors that were peeling at the corners and walls that wept condensation. This was a warehouse, a holding pen for the unwanted. The door banged open. It hit the wall with a crack that made me wince. A woman marched in. She was big, wearing scrubs that had seen better days and a pair of white Crocs that squeaked on the floor. She carried a plastic bin. She didn't look at my face. She looked at the clipboard in her hand. Bed 4, she barked. You are awake. About time. The van driver said you were out cold. Thought you might have expired on the ride over. She tossed the bin onto the foot of the bed. Strip, she ordered. I looked at her. I kept my face blank, my mouth slightly open. I was still playing the role. I was still the confused old man. Where am I? I rasped. My voice sounded like sandpaper. Is this the hotel? She laughed. It was a dry hacking sound. Yeah, honey, it is the hotel. The 5-star resort. Now take off your clothes. We have to inventory your personal effects. Policy. She didn't wait for me to move. She stepped forward and grabbed the front of my shirt. She ripped it open. The buttons popped, skittering across the floor like terrified beetles. She pulled the fabric down my arms, rough and efficient. She wasn't undressing a person. She was shucking corn. I let her do it. I let her strip me down to my underwear. I let her take the stained trousers and the sweat-soaked socks. But as she reached for my left sock, the one with the burner phone, I flinched. I pulled my leg back, a reflex of survival. Easy there, Grandpa, she snapped. Give me the sock. Cold, I mumbled. My feet are cold. Please, she rolled her eyes. Fine, keep the socks. But everything else goes in the bin. She threw a hospital gown at me. It was washed out gray and open at the back. Put that on. Dinner is in 20 minutes. If you can walk, you go to the cafeteria. If you cannot, you starve. Your choice. She grabbed the bin with my clothes and marched out. She didn't close the door. I sat there shivering in my underwear and socks. I looked at the gown. It smelled of industrial detergent and other people's sweat. I put it on. It offered no warmth, no dignity. It was a uniform of submission. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floor was sticky. I stood up swaying as the room spun. I had to get my bearings. I shuffled to the door and looked out into the hallway. It was a long corridor lined with doors just like mine. The paint was chipped. The fluorescent lights flickered. And the sounds. That was what hit me the hardest. The sounds of human misery. I heard moaning. I heard someone crying for their mother. I heard a man screaming at an invisible enemy. I saw an old woman sitting in a wheelchair facing the wall, her head lolling on her chest. A nurse walked past her without even glancing down. This was Happy Acres. The name was a cruel joke. It was a place where families dumped their guilt. It was a place where people came to wait for death. And my family, the people I had clothed and fed and loved, had put me here. They had thrown me into this pit to rot so they could buy sports cars and pay off gambling debts. The rage that had been a hot fire in my gut turned into something else. It turned into ice, cold, hard, and unbreakable. They thought they had discarded me. They thought I was just another number in a file. But they didn't know who I was. I was Thaddeus King. I had built skyscrapers. I had wired banks. I knew how structures worked. And I knew how to bring them down. I shuffled back into my room. I sat on the bed and waited. I needed darkness. I needed the shift change. I needed silence. Dinner came and went. A tray of gray meat and instant mashed potatoes was shoved onto the bedside table by a sullen orderly. I didn't touch it. I didn't know what was in it. I wasn't going to let them drug me again. I flushed the food down the toilet in the corner bit by bit so they wouldn't see a full tray and get suspicious. Night fell. The lights in the hallway dimmed to a sickly yellow. The sounds of the facility changed. The shouting stopped, replaced by the rhythmic wheezing of respirators and the soft shuffle of night nurses. I waited until I heard the heavy metal door at the end of the hall clang shut. That was the lockdown. The night shift was a skeleton crew. They would be at the station drinking coffee and looking at their phones. I pulled my legs up onto the bed. I sat cross-legged, creating a tent with the thin blanket. I reached down to my left ankle. My fingers brushed the hard rectangular outline of the phone. It was still there. My lifeline, my weapon. I pulled it out. The screen lit up the darkness under the blanket with a soft blue glow. The battery was at 80%. Plenty. I checked the signal. 2 bars. It was enough. I dialed the number I had memorized. The number that bypassed the receptionists and the secretaries. The number that went straight to the personal cell of the most ruthless lawyer in the state. It rang once. Twice. Stein, a voice answered. Crisp. Alert. It was 3 a.m, but he sounded like he was in the middle of a trial. Mr. Stein, I whispered. Thaddeus Stein said. The relief in his voice was palpable. We lost your signal for a few hours. The tracker showed you moving east. Then it went static. Where are you? I am at Happy Acres, I said. The state facility on the east side. Happy Acres. Stein spat the name like a curse. That is a violation. The medical certificate they used specified a private care facility. This is illegal confinement. Are you hurt? I am angry, I said, and I am ready. Did they take your things? Everything, except the phone. They think I am a vegetable, Stein. They think I am drooling on myself. Good, Stein said. Let them think that. It makes them careless. Did they file the papers? Yes. I heard them. They have the guardianship. Or they think they do. They are meeting with Apex Corp tomorrow morning at 9 to sign the sale agreement. 9 a.m., Stein repeated. That gives us 6 hours. Initiate protocol, Omega Y said. The words tasted sweet. It was the nuclear option. The plan we had drafted 3 years ago when I first suspected that Hunter was a snake. It was a scorched earth policy. Are you sure, Thaddeus Stein asked. Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. The family is done. The reputation. Everything. There is no family, I said. My voice was steady. There are only thieves. And I want them crushed. I want them to feel what it is like to have nothing. Understood, Stein said. I am mobilizing the team. I have the sheriff on standby. We have the affidavit from the bank regarding the trust. We have the footage from your study. We have everything." "Come get me," I said. "We are rolling," Stein said. "Sit tight, Thad. The cavalry is coming." The line went dead. I shoved the phone back into my sock. I lay back on the pillow. The smell of ammonia was still there, but I didn't notice it anymore. I was visualizing the morning. I was visualizing the look on Hunter's face when the door opened. I was visualizing Jasmine's tears when the handcuffs clicked. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the sounds of the nursing home, the coughing, the rattling pipes. But underneath it all, I heard a new sound, a low, distant rumble. It was the sound of a reckoning. It was the sound of the king returning to his throne. I lay there for hours, my mind a schematics of revenge. I planned every step. I knew exactly what I would wear. I knew exactly what I would say. I wasn't just an old man in a hospital gown. I was the architect of their destruction. At 5 a.m., the door opened. It was a different nurse, younger, tired. She came in to check my vitals. She shone a light in my eyes. I stared past her, vacant and dull. "Poor old guy," she muttered. "Dumped here like trash." She checked my pulse. She noted it on her chart. "BP is elevated," she noted. "Probably stress." She left. She didn't know. She didn't know that my blood pressure was up because I was ready to fight. She didn't know that the poor old guy was about to burn this whole corrupt system to the ground. I waited. The sun began to rise, turning the gray square of the window into a lighter shade of gray. The facility began to wake up. The noise level rose. Then I heard it. It wasn't the sound of a food cart. It wasn't the squeak of Crocs. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of boots, lots of them, marching in unison, and then a voice that boomed down the corridor, silencing the moans and the rattling carts. "This is the sheriff's department. Nobody move." I sat up. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I smoothed the wrinkles from my hospital gown. I sat up straight, my spine rigid, my head high. The door to my room flew open. But it wasn't a nurse. It was Mr. Stein. He was wearing a black trench coat over a charcoal suit. He looked like an avenging angel. Behind him stood 2 deputies, their hands on their belts. "Mr. King," Stein said. He didn't look at the room. He didn't look at the filth. He looked at me. "Mr. Stein," I said. He stepped forward and offered me a hand. I took it. I took. His grip was firm. "Your carriage awaits," he said. I stood up. I walked out of that room. I walked past the nurse's station where Big Brenda was standing with her mouth open, staring at the deputies. I walked past the administrator who was sweating and stammering to the sheriff. I walked out the front doors into the cool morning air. A black Lincoln Navigator was waiting at the curb. The engine was running. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of diesel and freedom. "Take me to the hotel," I told Stein as I climbed into the back seat. "I need a shower. I need a shave. And I need my suit." "We have a meeting to attend," Stein said, climbing in beside me. "Yes," I said, watching the nursing home disappear in the rearview mirror. "We have a closing. And I don't want to be late." While I was shedding the hospital gown in the back of a Lincoln Navigator, my home was being desecrated. I watched the security footage later, sitting in the quiet of my hotel suite with Mr. Stein. It was a hard thing to watch. It was like seeing a pack of hyenas tearing apart a lion that was still breathing. Back at the house, the celebration had begun the moment the transport van turned the corner at the end of the block. Hunter didn't wait. He didn't even pour a drink first. He went straight to the garage and came back with a 10-pound sledgehammer. He marched into the formal dining room, the room with the hand-carved crown molding and the wainscoting I had installed myself in 1985. He turned up the stereo system. He blasted some heavy, thumping bass music that shook the crystal in the china cabinet. He stood in the center of the room, swinging the hammer like a baseball bat, testing the weight. "Open concept," he shouted over the music. "That is what the market wants. Open flow, light, air. We get rid of these walls, Camille, and this place goes from a dusty relic to a modern masterpiece." Camille was sitting on the plastic-covered sofa holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. She was already half drunk. Her mascara was smudged and she was laughing a high, brittle sound that bordered on hysteria. "Do it," she cheered. "Tear it down, Hunter. It is too dark in here anyway. I always hated this room. It smells like old wood and cigars." That hurt. She had told me she loved that room. She had hosted Thanksgiving dinners there for 30 years. She had toasted our anniversaries under that chandelier, and now she was cheering for its destruction. Hunter swung. The hammer hit the plaster with a sickening crunch. Dust exploded into the air. He swung again, laughing like a maniac. He punched a hole right through the lath and plaster, exposing the studs. He ripped down the wallpaper Camille had picked out 10 years ago. He was not remodeling. He was erasing. He was erasing me. Jasmine was in the kitchen pacing. She had a calculator in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. She was muttering numbers to herself, her face pale and sweaty. 15 million, she said to the empty room. After taxes, maybe 10. My share is 4. I pay Vinny 400,000. That leaves 3.6. I can invest. I can flip it. I can make it back. She wasn't thinking about saving the family. She was thinking about her next bet. She was thinking about how long $3 million would last at the high rollers tables in Macau. Hunter kept swinging. He moved from the dining room to the study. He attacked the paneling. He smashed the wood I had imported from mahogany forests in Honduras. Splinters flew across the room. And then he hit something hard. A metallic clang rang out dull and heavy. Hunter stopped. He peered into the hole he had made in the wall behind my desk. "Jackpot," he yelled. "Jasmine! Camille! Get in here!" They ran into the study. Hunter was tearing at the broken wood with his bare hands, ignoring the splinters. He exposed a gray metal rectangle set between the studs. It was my secondary safe, the one I hadn't used in years, the one I had plastered over in '95. I didn't even know this was here. Camille gasped. "He never told me." "Of course he didn't." Hunter sneered. The old miser. He probably stuffed it with cash and forgot about it. He ran to get his drill. He came back with a diamond-tipped bit. He worked on the lock for 10 minutes, sweat pouring down his face, mixing with the plaster dust. He looked like a ghoul dug up from a grave. With a final grind of metal on metal, the lock gave way. Hunter yanked the door open. It wasn't full of cash. It wasn't full of gold. It contained a single thick leather binder embossed with gold letters. King Construction. Official incorporation and asset allocation. Hunter pulled it out. He held it up like Moses holding the tablets. "This is it," he breathed. "The original incorporation papers, the stock certificates, the whole kingdom." Jasmine grabbed it from him. She flipped it open on the desk, pushing aside the debris. Her eyes scanned the pages frantically. "Look at the valuation," she squealed. "The assets, the heavy machinery, the land contracts. It is all here." Hunter, the apex buyers, offered 15 million based on the current books. But with this, with the land deeds listed here, we could ask for 20. 20 million, Hunter roared. He grabbed the bottle of champagne from Camille and took a massive swig, foam spilling down his chin. "We are rich. We are untouchable." He grabbed Jasmine and spun her around. "Tomorrow, baby. Tomorrow we sign. I walk into that boardroom, I slam this binder on the table, and I tell those suits that the price just went up. And then I am going to the dealership." "Which one?" Jasmine laughed, caught up in the frenzy. "Ferrari," Hunter declared. "A 488 Pista, red, no black, matte black, like the Batmobile. I am going to park it right in this driveway." "And I am going to Paris," Camille slurred, leaning against the doorframe. "I am going to buy a flat in the Marais. I am going to drink wine and eat cheese and forget I ever lived in this dusty old house." They were drunk on greed. They were high on the fumes of a fortune they hadn't earned. They turned the pages of the binder, gloating over every asset, every truck, every crane listed in the inventory. "Look at this." Hunter pointed a grimy finger at a paragraph. "Total control of operations, vested interest. It says right here Thaddeus King is the sole proprietor. And since I am his guardian, I am Thaddeus King. I am the king." He laughed at his own joke. But in their haste, in their champagne-soaked arrogance, they missed the most important thing. They didn't turn to the very last page. They didn't read the addendum stapled to the back cover. It was a single sheet of heavy bond paper signed and notarized 3 years ago. It read in clear legal English, "Asset transfer notification. Effective January 1st, 2021, all assets, stocks, and intellectual property of King Construction are hereby transferred to the King Family Irrevocable Trust. Thaddeus King retains title solely as operating manager. Ownership is vested in the trust. Sole beneficiary, redacted. They didn't see it. They didn't look. They saw what they wanted to see. They saw dollar signs and freedom. They didn't see the cage door swinging shut behind them. We need to celebrate, Hunter shouted. Real celebration. He went to the stereo and turned the volume up to the maximum. The bass thumped through the floorboards, shaking the dust from the ceiling. They danced. It was a grotesque, macabre dance. Hunter gyrating with the sledgehammer, Camille swaying with her bottle, Jasmine twirling with the binder clutched to her chest. They partied on the ruins of my life. They toasted to my demise. Finally, the adrenaline crashed. The alcohol took over. One by one, they stumbled upstairs. They didn't go to the guest rooms. They went to the master suite. My suite. Hunter kicked open the door to my bedroom. He threw himself onto the bed, boots and all. He didn't even wash the plaster dust off his face. Jasmine crawled in beside him, curling up with the binder still in her arms like a teddy bear. Camille stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at them. Then she shrugged. She climbed into the bed too, on the other side. My wife, my daughter, and my son-in-law passed out in a tangle of limbs and greed on the Egyptian cotton sheets I had bought for our anniversary. They slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the victorious. They snored in unison, oblivious to the world outside, oblivious to the black SUV parked down the street, oblivious to the man in the hotel room 5 miles away who was shaving off a 3-day beard and tying a Windsor knot in a silk tie. They thought the sun would rise on their new empire. They didn't know that the sun was already setting on their entire existence. I watched the feed go dark as the motion sensors in the bedroom timed out. I turned off the tablet. Sleep tight, I whispered to the empty hotel room. Enjoy the bed. It is the last soft thing you will feel for a very long time. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were spread out below me, a grid of gold and white. Somewhere out there in the darkness my family was sleeping, and somewhere else the gears of justice were grinding into motion. Mr. Stein stood up from the armchair in the corner. He checked his watch. It is 4 a.m., Thaddeus. The sheriff is meeting us at the perimeter at 8:30. Are you ready? I adjusted my cufflinks. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit. I looked in the mirror. The confused old man was gone. Thaddeus King was back. I am ready, I said. Let's go sell a company. At 2 in the morning, Happy Acres was not silent. It was a symphony of neglect. The radiator in the corner of my room clanked like a dying engine. Down the hall, someone was screaming about spiders on the ceiling. The air was thick with the smell of industrial cleaner trying and failing to mask the scent of human waste. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I was not sleeping. I was counting the seconds. My burner phone was tucked safely in my sock, but I didn't need to check it. Mr. Stein was a man of precision. If he said he was coming, he was coming. I smoothed the rough cotton of the hospital gown over my knees. It was a humiliating garment designed to strip away autonomy, leaving you exposed and vulnerable. But underneath that thin fabric, my heart was beating with the steady rhythm of a pile driver. They had taken my clothes. They had taken my dignity. But they had made the fatal mistake of leaving me my mind. And now the bill was coming due. Then I saw it. A sweep of bright white light cut across the ceiling as heavy vehicles turned into the parking lot. The crunch of gravel under tires was loud in the stillness. It wasn't the rattle of a delivery truck. It was the heavy, purposeful sound of SUVs, expensive ones. I stood up. I walked to the door of my room and pressed my ear against the wood. The front entrance of the facility was down the hall and around the corner, but the building was poorly constructed. Sound traveled. I heard the electronic buzz of the front door intercom, then a loud, insistent pounding. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the sound of authority demanding entry. Open the door, a voice boomed. It was amplified, likely a megaphone. This is the county sheriff. Open the door immediately or we will breach. There was a scuffle of footsteps from the nurse's station. I heard the night manager, a weaselly man named Griffin, who smelled of stale cigarettes, shouting something unintelligible. The buzzer sounded long and angry. The heavy magnetic locks disengaged with a clunk. The double doors flew open. The sound of boots on linoleum was like thunder. It wasn't just 2 or 3 people. It sounded like an army. I stepped back from the door. I stood in the center of the room. I clasped my hands behind my back. I lifted my chin. I was not a patient anymore. I was Thaddeus King, and my entourage had arrived. The commotion in the hallway grew louder. You cannot just barge in here, Griffin was shouting. His voice was high and panicked. This is a private medical facility. You need a warrant. You are violating HIPAA regulations. I heard a voice I recognized instantly. It was cool, dry, and sharp as a razor blade. It was the voice of Mr. Stein. Mr. Griffin Stein said. His voice cut through the noise like a knife through rotten fruit. I suggest you lower your voice before I add obstruction of justice to the laundry list of charges I am currently drafting against you. What charges? Griffin stammered. Who are you? I am the attorney for Mr. Thaddeus King, Stein replied, and this is Sheriff Miller. We are executing a court order for the immediate release of a patient being held against his will. We are also executing a search warrant for your office regarding the acceptance of a $50,000 bribe from a Mr. Hunter Vance. Bribe, Griffin squeaked. I do not know what you are talking about. We have the bank records, Griffin the sheriff's deep voice rumbled. We have the wire transfer, and we have the text messages on Mr. Vance's phone. Now step aside or you will be leaving in cuffs right now. There was a silence, a heavy, terrified silence. Then the sound of someone shuffling out of the way. Room 4. Stein barked, secure the perimeter. Heavy footsteps marched down the hall. They stopped outside my door. The handle turned. The door swung open. Light flooded the room. It wasn't the sickly yellow of the hallway fluorescence. It was the bright, clean beams of tactical flashlights. I blinked, my eyes adjusting. Mr. Stein stood in the doorway. He looked out of place in this hellhole. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than the annual budget of this entire facility. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed. He looked like a shark in a tuxedo. Behind him stood 4 men who were not lawyers. They were giants. They wore dark suits and earpieces. My personal security detail. And behind them the sheriff looking grim, Mr. Kingstein said. He stepped into the room, ignoring the filth on the floor. He looked me up and down. His eyes narrowed when he saw the hospital gown and the bruises on my arms from the rough handling earlier. I am Feinstein, I said. My voice was strong, clear, no trace of the senile wobble I had affected for the last 2 days. Get me out of here. Stein nodded. He turned to the giant closest to him. Get his clothes, he ordered. The bodyguard nodded. He didn't have to go far. He turned and walked out to the Lincoln Navigator parked right at the front door. Griffin appeared in the doorway, flanked by a deputy. He looked at me, his eyes bulging. Wait, he stammered. He is lucid. The intake form said he was catatonic. Advanced dementia. He didn't know his own name. I looked at Griffin. I let him see the intelligence in my eyes. I let him see the cold, calculating rage. I know my name, Mr. Griffin, I said softly, and I know yours. I also know that you took cash to keep me sedated and locked in this room without proper medical evaluation. You are going to lose your license. You are going to lose this facility, and you are going to spend a very long time in a cell much smaller than this one. Griffin turned pale. He slumped against the doorframe, defeated. The bodyguard returned. He was carrying a garment bag and a pair of polished leather shoes. He hung the bag on the hook behind the door. I unzipped it. Inside was my charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, a silk tie, my cufflinks. It was my armor. Give us a moment, I said. Everyone turned their backs. I stripped off the hospital gown and threw it into the corner. It landed on a pile of dust bunnies. Good riddance. I dressed slowly, methodically. I buttoned the shirt. I fastened the cufflinks. I tied the tie in a perfect Windsor knot. I stepped into the trousers. I put on the shoes. When I turned around, I was no longer the victim. I was the CEO. I was the patriarch. I was the king. I am ready, I said. Stein smiled, a thin, predatory smile. The car is waiting, sir. We walked out of that room and I didn't look back. We marched down the hallway like a conquering army. The nurses and orderlies pressed themselves against the walls, eyes wide with fear and confusion. They had never seen a patient leave Happy Acres in a limousine. They had never seen a patient leave with a lawyer and a sheriff. We stepped out into the cool night air. It was 3 a.m. The city was quiet. The air tasted sweet. Stein held the door of the Navigator open for me. I slid into the leather seat. It was soft, warm, and smelled of expensive conditioner. Where to? Thaddeus Stein asked as he climbed in beside me. Home. No, I said. Not home. Not yet. Those vultures are sleeping in my bed. I don't want to see them until I am fully prepared. Take me to the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz, Stein asked, raising an eyebrow. I need a shower, Stein. I need to scrub the smell of that place off my skin. I need a barber. And I need a steak. A porterhouse. Rare. Stein nodded to the driver. The Ritz-Carlton. And call ahead. Tell them Mr. King needs the presidential suite. We drove through the sleeping city. I watched the street lights blur past the tinted windows. I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The panic was gone. The anger was still there, but it was controlled now. It was fuel. We arrived at the hotel. The staff was waiting. They didn't blink an eye at a man checking in at 3:30 in the morning with a lawyer and a security detail. They knew who I was. They ushered me into the private elevator. The suite was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, deep carpets, gold fixtures. It was the opposite of the storage room. It was the opposite of Happy Acres. I ordered the steak. I ordered a bottle of scotch. While I waited, I went into the bathroom. It was size of a small apartment. I turned on the shower. Hot. Scalding hot. I stood under the water for 20 minutes. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I washed away the feeling of Camille's fake lemonade. I washed away the memory of Hunter's hands searching my pockets. I washed away the smell of betrayal. When I came out, the food was waiting. I ate like a starving man. The steak was perfect. The scotch burned pleasantly in my throat. I felt my strength returning. I felt the old Thaddeus King coming back to life. A barber arrived at 5 a.m. He shaved me with a straight razor, hot towels, and precision. He trimmed my hair. He massaged my scalp. When he was done, I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was not a victim. He was a warrior. The lines on my face were not signs of weakness. They were battle scars. My eyes were clear and sharp. Stein was sitting in the living area going over documents on his tablet. The sheriff has secured the evidence from the nursing home, Stein said without looking up. Griffin is in custody. He is singing like a canary. He confirmed Hunter paid him. He confirmed the medical documents were falsified. We have enough to put Hunter away for 20 years. And the others I asked. Jasmine and Camille are accomplices. Conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, they are looking at serious time too. But the sale of the company is the linchpin. Once Hunter signs that document as your guardian, he commits federal fraud. That is the nail in the coffin. What time is the meeting, I asked. 9 a.m., Stein said. At your corporate headquarters. Apex Corp is bringing their legal team. Hunter thinks he is walking out of there with a check for $15 million. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the city I had helped build. I saw the cranes in the distance. I saw the highways. I saw the lights of thousands of homes. My family thought they could take this from me. They thought they could erase me. They thought I was just an old man who had served his purpose. They forgot that I was the one who poured the foundations. They forgot that I knew where every skeleton was buried because I was the one who dug the holes. Let them have their morning, I said softly. Let them walk into that boardroom. Let them taste the victory. Let them think they have won. I turned back to Stein. Have the car ready at 8:30, I said. I want to make an entrance. Stein nodded. He closed his tablet. It will be a pleasure, Thaddeus. I stood by the window as the sun began to crest over the horizon. It bathed the city in gold light. It was a new day, a day of reckoning. Tomorrow, I whispered to the glass, they will know who the new boss is. And then I smiled, because the new boss was the same as the old boss, and he was very, very angry. The elevator ride to the top floor of the King Construction headquarters was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I stood in the center of the car, flanked by Mr. Stein and the 2 federal agents who had joined us in the lobby. I watched the numbers climb on the digital display. Floor 10, floor 15, floor 20. With every ding of the passing floors, I felt the weight of the last 3 days falling away. The confused old man in the stained sweatpants was gone. The victim who had been drugged and dumped in a warehouse was gone. In the reflection of the polished brass doors, I saw only Thaddeus King. I saw the man who had turned a single cement mixer into a skyline. I adjusted my tie one last time. It was a power tie, a deep crimson silk that I saved for closing deals or firing executives. Today, I was doing both. The elevator doors slid open. The reception area was quiet, bathed in the soft morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, whom I had hired fresh out of college, looked up from her desk. Her eyes went wide. She dropped her pen. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. She looked as if she were seeing a ghost. I brought a finger to my lips in a gesture of silence. She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. She knew. Everyone in the office knew that something was wrong. They knew that Hunter and Jasmine had taken over. They knew that the vultures were circling. Seeing me standing there upright and sharp in my bespoke suit must have felt like a miracle. I walked past her desk without a word. The double glass doors of the main boardroom were just down the hall. They were frosted for privacy, but I could see the blurred silhouettes of the people inside. I could hear voices. The walls of my building were thick, soundproofed to keep the noise of the city out, but they couldn't keep the stench of betrayal in. I stopped just outside the doors. Mr. Stein stood to my right. The agent stood behind us. I motioned for them to wait. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the eulogy they were delivering for my legacy before I kicked the casket open. I pressed my ear closer to the gap between the doors. Hunter was speaking. His voice was loud, booming with an unearned confidence. He was projecting, trying to fill a room that was too big for him. The fact is, Gentleman Hunter said King Construction has been stagnant for a decade. Thaddeus was a great man in his time, sure. He knew how to pour concrete, but he didn't understand the modern market. He was risk-averse. He held onto assets that were depreciating. He didn't understand leverage. I clenched my jaw. Risk-averse. I had risked everything I owned 3 times over to keep this company afloat during the recession of 2008. I had paid my workers out of my own savings when the banks froze credit lines. I understood leverage better than he understood how to tie his own shoes. Under my leadership, Hunter continued, his voice dripping with arrogance. We are going to pivot. We are going to liquidate the heavy machinery division. It is overhead we don't need. We are going to focus on high-end residential development, gentrification projects. That is where the margin is. We take the King name, which still has some street value in this city, and we slap it on luxury condos. Low cost, high yield. We are trimming the fat. Trimming the fat. He was talking about the men and women who had worked for me for 20 years. He was talking about the foremen who knew the soil composition of this city by taste. He was going to fire them all to build cheap apartments for yuppies. I heard a different voice. It was deep, gravelly, and impatient. It belonged to Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Apex Corp. Apex was my biggest rival. They were a conglomerate that cut corners, used cheap materials, and buried their lawsuits in paperwork. I had beaten them on every major bid for the last 5 years because the city knew that when Thaddeus King built a bridge, it didn't collapse. That is all very fascinating, Hunter Thorne said. He sounded bored. But we are not buying your vision. We are buying the client list and the permits. We can discuss your pivot later. Right now I have a plane to catch. Let us get to the signatures. Hunter laughed. A nervous, ingratiating sound. Of course, Marcus. Straight to business. I like that. We are going to get along great. I shifted my position so I could see through the narrow gap between the doors. The scene inside made my blood boil. Hunter was sitting at the head of the table, my chair. He was wearing my suit. It was a navy pinstripe I had bought in London 5 years ago. I recognized the cut immediately, but on him it looked ridiculous. The shoulders were too broad, the sleeves too long. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's closet. He was sweating despite the climate control. He kept wiping his palms on his trousers. My trousers. Jasmine sat to his right. She was tapping her foot frantically, a staccato rhythm that vibrated through the floor. She was checking her phone every 10 seconds. She looked terrified. She wasn't looking at the contract. She was looking at the clock. She knew the deadline was looming. She knew that if that money wasn't wired by noon, the threats from the casino owners would become reality. Camille was there too. She sat on the other side of Hunter, staring blankly at the polished wood of the table. She held a glass of water with both hands, staring into it as if it were a crystal ball showing her a future she didn't want to see. She looked aged, diminished. The guilt was eating her alive, but not enough to stop her. She was still there. She was still an accomplice. The table was covered in documents. Thick stacks of paper representing the dismemberment of my life's work. Thorne sat opposite Hunter, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like Dobermans in suits. They were watching Hunter with open contempt. They knew they were stealing this company. They knew the $15 million price tag was a fraction of its true value. They were buying a diamond for the price of glass because the seller was a desperate fool. So one of the Apex lawyers said, sliding a heavy document across the table, "This is the transfer of ownership agreement, and this is the affidavit of guardianship. We have reviewed the medical certificate provided by Dr. Rogers. It seems to be in order. It is," Hunter said quickly. He grabbed a pen. It was my Mont Blanc fountain pen, the one with the gold nib. He didn't even know how to hold it properly. He gripped it like a crayon. It is tragic, really, a rapid decline, but we are doing what is best for him. The proceeds from this sale will ensure he gets the best care possible for the remainder of his life. Jasmine let out a small, choked sound. Hunter kicked her under the table. "Sign it, Hunter," she hissed. "Just sign it." Hunter uncapped the pen. He looked at the document. He looked at the check sitting in the center of the table. $15 million. He licked his lips. Greed radiated off him like heat from a pavement. "I am signing as the legal guardian of Thaddeus King," Hunter announced grandly, effectively transferring all rights and titles to Apex Corporation. He lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered millimeters from the signature line. The room held its breath. Thorne leaned forward. Jasmine stopped tapping her foot. Camille closed her eyes. This was it. The moment of death. The moment my legacy was signed away by a thief wearing my clothes. I signaled to Stein. Now. I didn't open the door. I kicked it. I put the heel of my polished leather shoe right next to the handle and drove it forward with all the strength in my leg. The double doors flew open with a crash that sounded like a gunshot. The glass panels rattled in their frames. The noise was explosive, shocking. Inside the room, everyone jumped. Hunter jerked so hard the pen flew out of his hand and skittered across the polished table. Jasmine screamed. Thorne stood up, knocking his chair over. I stepped into the room. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, heavy cadence of a man who owns the ground he walks on. I let the door swing shut behind me, revealing Stein and the federal agents blocking the exit. I stopped at the end of the long table directly opposite Hunter. I looked at him. I looked at the suit that didn't fit. I looked at the sweat on his upper lip. I looked at the terror that was rapidly replacing the arrogance in his eyes. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one breathed. No one moved. They were staring at a dead man walking. I reached out and picked up the Mont Blanc pen from where it had rolled. I inspected it. I wiped a smudge of Hunter's sweat from the barrel with my thumb. "That pen is too heavy for your hand, son," I said. My voice was low, calm, and deadly. "It takes a man to hold a pen like this, not a parasite." Hunter made a sound like a strangling cat. He pushed himself back in my chair, scrambling away from me. "Thad," he squeaked. "You are. You are supposed to be. Dead," I finished for him. "Comatose. Drooling in a bed at Happy Acres. Is that what you were going to say?" Camille let out a wail. She covered her face with her hands. Jasmine was frozen, her mouth open, her eyes wide with shock. "Who is this?" Thorne barked, looking from me to Hunter. "You said he was incapacitated. You said he didn't know his own name." I turned my gaze to Thorne. I knew Marcus Thorne. He was a ruthless businessman, but he wasn't a fool. "Hello, Marcus," I said pleasantly. "I see you are trying to buy my company for pennies on the dollar. I always knew you were a vulture, but I didn't think you would stoop to picking carrion from a living man," Thaddeus Thorne said. He looked at the papers on the table, then back at me. His eyes narrowed. He realized instantly that the deal was radioactive. "This meeting is over," he signaled to his lawyers. They started packing their briefcases immediately. "Wait!" Hunter shouted. He stood up, trying to regain control of a room that had spun wildly out of his orbit. "Do not listen to him. He is sick. He has dementia. I have the papers. I have the power of attorney. He escaped from the facility. He is a danger to himself. Security. Call security. Sit down, Hunter," I roared. My voice echoed off the glass walls. It was the voice I used to command construction crews over the roar of jackhammers. It was a voice of absolute authority. Hunter collapsed back into the chair. He looked small. He looked broken. Mr. Stein stepped forward. He placed a briefcase on the table and opened it. He didn't take out a contract. He took out a remote control. He pointed it at the large presentation screen on the wall. "Mr. Vance claims that Mr. King is mentally incompetent," Stein said to the room. "He claims he has medical proof. We would like to present a counter-argument." He pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The video was grainy, high-contrast black and white. It was the footage from the camera in my study. It showed Hunter and Camille breaking into the safe. It showed them laughing. "Once we gentrify the kitchen," Hunter's voice boomed from the speakers, "we can list it for $2 million. The video cut. A new clip played. It was Jasmine in the kitchen pouring champagne. "I owe them $400,000, she was sobbing on screen. "If I don't wire the money by Friday, they are going to cut off my fingers." The video cut again. This was the worst one. It was the footage from the storage room. It showed Camille handing me the poisoned tea. It showed me falling. and it showed Hunter searching my unconscious body, ripping my clothes, cursing me for not dying fast enough. "You should have just died, old man," the Hunter on the screen whispered. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, suffocating. Every person in that room had just witnessed a conspiracy to commit murder. Thorne looked at Hunter with pure disgust. "You make me sick," he spat. He turned to me. "Thaddeus, I had no idea. We were told." "Get out, Marcus," I said cold. "Get out of my building. And if I ever see you or your lawyers near my property again, I will bury you under so many lawsuits your grandchildren will be paying the legal fees." Thorne didn't argue. He and his team fled the room as if the building were on fire. Now it was just us, the family, and the law. Hunter was shaking. He was white as a sheet. Jasmine was crying, silent tears running down her tanned cheeks. Camille was rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. I walked to the head of the table. I stood over Hunter. "You wanted to be the king," I said softly. "You wanted the throne. You wanted the power. Well, here it is." I gestured to the agents. "Take him." The agents moved in. They pulled Hunter out of my chair. They spun him around and slammed him against the table. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and attempted murder," the agent recited. "No," Hunter screamed. "It was her. It was Jasmine. She made me do it. She owed the money. I just wanted to help. He was a coward to the end, throwing his wife under the bus to save himself." Jasmine looked up. Her eyes were full of betrayal. "You bastard," she screamed. "You said you would fix it. You said he wouldn't wake up." I looked at my daughter, the girl I had protected from the world. "And you, Jasmine," I said, "you sold your father for a spin of the roulette wheel. You pawned my life to pay for your addiction. Daddy, please," she wailed. "They were going to hurt me. I was scared." "You should be scared," I said. "You should be terrified. Because the people you owe money to, they are nothing compared to what the federal government is going to do to you." The second agent handcuffed Jasmine. She collapsed weeping, dragging the agent down with her. Camille looked up at me. Her eyes were red, swollen. "Thad," she whispered, "I am sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you." I looked at her. I looked at the pearls I had given her. I looked at the hands that had mixed the poison. "No, Camille," I said. "You don't love me. You love the life I gave you, and you were willing to kill the man to keep the lifestyle." I turned my back on them. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city. "Take them away," I said. I heard the scuffling of feet. I heard the sobbing. I heard the doors open and close. And then there was silence. I was alone in the boardroom. I was alone in my company. I was alone in the world. But as I looked out at the skyline, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. I had torn down the rotten structure. I had cleared the site. Now it was time to rebuild. The chaos in the boardroom was instantaneous and deafening. Hunter scrambled back from the table, his chair toppling over with a loud crash. He looked at me as if I were a corpse that had clawed its way out of the grave to drag him back down into the dirt. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving under the fabric of my suit. He grabbed the guardianship papers from the table and waved them in the air like a shield, desperate to ward off the reality that was closing in on him. He escaped. Hunter screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Call security. Call the police. This man is mentally unstable. He is a danger to himself and others. I have the papers. I have the court order right here. He belongs in a facility." He looked around the room, pleading with the Apex lawyers, pleading with Marcus Thorne, pleading with anyone who would listen to his lies. "Look at him," Hunter yelled, sweat dripping down his forehead. "He doesn't know where he is. He thinks he runs this place. He is sick. Help me restrain him." I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just stood there, flanked by Mr. Stein and the federal agents, and watched him unravel. It was pathetic. It was the frantic thrashing of a rat that knows the trap has already snapped shut. Marcus Thorne looked at Hunter with a mixture of confusion and distaste. He looked at me, standing tall and lucid in my bespoke suit, and then he looked at the sweating, screaming man who claimed to be my guardian. The math wasn't adding up, and Thorne was a man who lived by the numbers. Mr. Stein stepped forward. He moved with the calm precision of an executioner. He placed a silver briefcase on the polished mahogany table and snapped the latches open. He didn't say a word to Hunter. He didn't even look at him. He pulled out a laptop and connected it to the boardroom's main presentation system. "What are you doing?" Hunter shouted. You cannot use that. That is company property. I am the CEO. I order you to stop. Stein ignored him. He tapped a key. The massive screen at the head of the room, which had been displaying the Apex merger logo, flickered and changed. The lights in the room dimmed automatically. The first video appeared. It was grainy and black and white, taken from the hidden camera in the storage room. The date and timestamp in the corner showed it was from the previous evening. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by the boardroom's high-end sound system. On the screen, Camille walked into the small room. She was holding a steaming mug. The camera angle was perfect. It showed her face clearly. It showed the cold, detached expression she wore as she handed me the poisoned tea. "Drink it," Thad the Camille on the screen said. Her voice echoed through the silent boardroom. "It will make you feel better." The video cut to a close-up. It showed her watching me fall. It showed her standing over my body, not calling for help, not checking for a pulse, but watching with a terrifying patience. I heard a gasp from the corner of the room. The real Camille was staring at the screen, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She was seeing herself through the eyes of a jury, and she knew there was no defense for what she was seeing. Stein tapped a key. The video changed. Now it was the kitchen. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. Jasmine was sitting at the counter, a glass of wine in her hand. She was crying, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of selfish terror. "I owe them $400,000, the Jasmine on the screen sobbed. "If I don't pay them, they are going to hurt me. We have to sell the company, Hunter. We have to sell it now. Who cares about Dad? He has lived his life. I have my whole life ahead of me." The Jasmine in the boardroom let out a wail. She slumped forward, burying her face in her arms on the table. The Apex lawyers were staring at her, their mouths agape. This wasn't a business deal. This was a crime scene. Stein tapped the key one last time. The third video played. This was the one that sealed the lid on the coffin. It was footage from a coffee shop downtown. It showed Hunter sitting across from a disheveled man with a red nose. Dr. Silas Rogers. Hunter reached into a bag and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the table. Rogers opened it. It was full of cash. $50,000, the Hunter on the screen said. All cash. "Just sign the certificate, Silas. Say he is incompetent. Say he has advanced dementia. Once he is in the pines, nobody is going to check." Rogers took the envelope. He smiled. "Consider him certified," he said. The screen went black. The lights came back up. The silence in the room was heavier than concrete. It pressed down on everyone, suffocating and absolute. There was no way to spin this. There was no way to explain it away. It was conspiracy. It was fraud. It was attempted murder. And it was all recorded in high definition. Hunter was leaning against the wall, his legs trembling so hard he could barely stand. The paper he had been waving, the guardianship order he had pinned all his hopes on, fluttered from his hand and landed on the floor. It lay there, a useless piece of trash. I walked over to it. I picked it up. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Silas Rogers. I looked at Hunter. "Is this your shield, son?" I asked softly. "Is this the paper that makes you the king?" Hunter didn't answer. He couldn't speak. He was hyperventilating, making small wheezing sounds. I ripped the paper in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I ripped it again and again. I let the pieces fall like confetti onto the expensive carpet. "You missed something, Hunter," I said. "You were so busy drilling into my safes and bribing my doctors that you forgot to do your due diligence. You forgot the first rule of construction. Check the foundation." I walked to the head of the table. I placed my hands on the leather chair that Hunter had been warming. I leaned forward, looking at the stunned faces of the Apex team. "You thought you were buying King Construction," I said to Marcus Thorne. "You thought you were buying my assets, my machinery, my contracts. You thought you were getting a steal because my guardian was signing it over." I turned my gaze to Hunter. "But you cannot sell what you do not own, Hunter." Hunter looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and confused. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. "You own it. You are the sole proprietor. I saw the binder. I saw the stock certificates. You saw what I wanted you to see," I said. "You saw the operating documents. But you didn't look at the dates, and you certainly didn't check the county clerk's records." I motioned to Stein. He pulled a single bound document from his briefcase and slid it down the table. It stopped right in front of Hunter. 3 years ago, I continued, my voice steady and strong. I realized that I had a snake in my garden. I realized that my son-in-law was looking at my business not as a legacy to build, but as a piggy bank to smash. So I made a change. I tapped the document on the table. I transferred 100% of the shares of King Construction, along with the title to this building and every piece of heavy machinery in the yard, into the King Family Irrevocable Trust. Hunter stared at the document. He didn't touch it. He looked like he was afraid it would bite him. Irrevocable, I said, savoring the word. Do you know what that means, Hunter? It means I cannot take it back. It means I do not own it anymore. I am not the owner of King Construction. I am an employee. I am the manager hired by the trust to run the day-to-day operations. My salary is $1 a year. The room spun for Hunter. I could see it in his eyes. The $15 million, the Ferrari, the offshore accounts. They were evaporating like mist in the sun, but he stammered. But if you are incapacitated, if I am your guardian, I control your assets. You control my personal assets, I corrected him. You control my checking account, you control my socks, but you do not control the trust. The trust has its own bylaws. It has its own board of trustees. And do you know what the bylaws say happens if the manager becomes incapacitated? I leaned in closer. It says that management authority immediately transfers to the appointed successor. It does not go to family. It does not go to a guardian. It goes to the person I named 3 years ago. Who? Hunter whispered. Who is it? I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. Mrs. Etta, I said. Hunter's jaw dropped. Etta, he choked out. The housekeeper. The woman you treated like furniture for 18 years, I said. The woman you ignored. The woman you disrespected. She is the trustee. She controls the company. She controls the money. And she hates you, Hunter. She hates you more than she hates dust. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had broken into my safe. He had poisoned me. He had risked everything. And even if he had succeeded, even if I was drooling in a bed at Happy Acres right now, he wouldn't have been able to sell a single screw. His signature was worthless. His power of attorney was a blank check drawn on an empty account. The Apex lawyers were already packing up. They were professionals. They knew a dead deal when they saw one. They knew that buying a company from a fraudster who didn't even hold the title was a legal nightmare they wanted no part of. Marcus Thorne stood up. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and imposing. He adjusted his suit jacket. He picked up his briefcase. He looked at me and nodded a gesture of respect from one shark to another. Well played, Thaddeus, he said. You wasted my morning, but I have to admit that was impressive. Then he turned to Hunter. Hunter was slumped against the wall, looking like a deflated balloon. Thorne walked over to him. He stood in front of him, blocking out the light. You told me you had full authority, Thorne said. His voice was a low rumble. You told me this was a clean deal. You dragged my team out here. You drafted contracts. You wasted my time. And in my business, time is the only thing more expensive than money. Hunter looked up, his eyes pleading. Marcus, please. I didn't know. He tricked me. Thorne didn't speak. He pulled back his hand and slapped Hunter across the face. It wasn't a fight slap. It was a dismissal. It was the backhanded slap of a king disciplining a peasant. It was loud, sharp, and humiliating. Hunter's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed instantly on his cheek. Do not ever say my name again, Thorne hissed. If you come within 500 feet of my office, I will have you arrested for trespassing. You are a fraud, and you are a failure. Thorne turned and walked out of the room, his team trailing behind him. The door swung shut, leaving us alone with the wreckage of Hunter's ambition. Hunter held his cheek. Tears were streaming down his face now. He looked at Jasmine, but she wouldn't look at him. She was staring at her hands handcuffed behind her back. He looked at Camille, but she was catatonic with shock. The federal agents stepped forward. The show was over. It was time for the cleanup. Hunter Vance, the lead agent, said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for wire fraud conspiracy to commit murder and violation of the Elder Justice Act. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Hunter didn't fight. He didn't run. He had nowhere to go. The fantasy was over. He turned around slowly, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The agent slapped the cuffs on him. The metallic click echoed in the silent boardroom. I watched him. I watched the man who had lived in my house, eaten my food, and plotted my death. I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, just a cold, clean sense of finality. I had demolished the old structure. The lot was cleared. Take them away, I said to the agents. Hunter looked at me over his shoulder as they dragged him towards the door. You planned this, he spat. You knew. You let us do it. I straightened my tie. I looked him in the eye. I didn't make you do anything, Hunter, I said. I just gave you the rope. You were the one who tied the noose. The agents marched them out, Hunter weeping and stumbling, Jasmine silent and broken, Camille looking back at me one last time with eyes that begged for a mercy I didn't have. I stood alone in the boardroom. I looked at the empty chairs. I looked at the screen that was now dark. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt lighter. The stench of betrayal was gone. Mr. Stein closed his briefcase. What now, Thaddeus, he asked. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. Now I said we go to the house. I have one more eviction to process, and I believe Mrs. Etta is waiting for her keys. The sound of handcuffs tightening is distinct. It is a series of mechanical clicks that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of consequences. In the boardroom, that sound seemed to echo off the glass walls, drowning out the hum of the city 20 floors below. Hunter was pressed against the mahogany table, his face distorted by the pressure of the federal agent's grip. But it was Jasmine who shattered the silence. "Daddy, please," she screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable, a shrill tear in the fabric of the room. "I was forced. You have to believe me. Hunter made me do it. He said he would hurt me if I did not help him. He said he would kill you anyway and frame me for it. I was a hostage, Daddy. I was scared. I looked at my daughter. Her mascara was running in black rivers down her face. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, except the cookie jar was my life, and the theft was attempted murder. She was lying. I knew she was lying. I had seen the footage. I had heard her voice in the kitchen, cool and calculating, counting her share of the inheritance before my body was even cold. "You are a liar," Hunter roared, twisting his head to look at her. His face was purple with rage. "You are a gambling junkie, Jasmine. Tell him about the Maldives. Tell him about the 400,000. You begged me to liquidate the company. You said if we didn't get the cash by Friday, the sharks were going to mail your fingers to the house in a box." He turned his desperate eyes to me. "Thaddeus, listen to me. I am a businessman. I make deals. I made a bad deal with your daughter. She is sick. She has a problem. I was just trying to clean up her mess. I was trying to protect the family name." "Protect the family name," I repeated softly. "By poisoning the patriarch, by forging medical documents, by selling a 40-year-old company for scrap." "It was her idea," Hunter spat. "She said you were old. She said you were useless. She said you were taking up space." "Stop it!" Jasmine shrieked. She lunged at him, but the agent held her back. "I hate you! I hate you!" I watched them tear each other apart. It was like watching wolves turn on a wounded pack member. There was no loyalty here. There was no love. There was only survival instinct and rot. "Daddy, look at me," Jasmine sobbed. "I am your princess. Remember, you built me a treehouse. You cannot let them take me to jail. I am pregnant." I froze. Pregnant. For a second the world tilted. A grandchild. A legacy. "She is lying," Hunter laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. "She is not pregnant, Thaddeus. She had her tubes tied 3 years ago. She didn't want to ruin her figure. She told me kids were a bad investment." I looked at Jasmine. She didn't deny it. She just looked down, her shoulders shaking. That was the final blow. She would use an imaginary child, my imaginary grandchild, as a shield to save herself. "Get them out of my sight," I said to the agents. "Wait!" A voice cried out from the hallway. "Stop! What is happening?" We all turned. The elevator doors had opened and Camille was running down the hallway. She looked frantic. Her hair was wild, her blouse buttoned wrong. Hunter must have texted her when I kicked the doors open. She had come to save the sinking ship. She burst into the room. She stopped dead when she saw the handcuffs. She saw Hunter pressed against the table. She saw Jasmine being held by an agent. And then she saw me, standing tall, standing alive. "Thad," she gasped. She put a hand to her throat. "Oh my God, you are okay. They told me. They told me you were gone." "Save it, Camille," I said. My voice was tired. "I watched the video. I saw you hand me the tea. I saw you watch me fall." Camille paled. She looked at the screen where the frozen image of her crime was still displayed. She realized there was no lie that could cover this. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She negotiated. "Thad, please," she said, walking towards me, her hands outstretched. "We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we are family. We can work this out. You don't have to send them to prison. You don't have to ruin us." I stepped back. "Do not touch me." Okay, she stammered. "I understand. You are angry. You have every right to be. But think about the optics. Think about the scandal. We can handle this quietly. We can go to therapy. Therapy. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You tried to kill me, Camille. That is not a marital issue. That is a felony. She looked around the room, her eyes darting from the agents to Mr. Stein. She realized she was losing. She realized the people were going to jail. And then the survival instinct kicked in. The same greed that had led her to poison my tea surfaced. Fine, she said, her voice hardening. Send them to jail. If they broke the law, they faced the consequences. But what about me, Thad? I am your wife. We have been married 40 years. Half of everything is mine. I stared at her. She was throwing her daughter and son-in-law into the fire to save her own share of the fortune. You want a divorce? I asked. I want what is fair, she said, lifting her chin. I want my half of the assets. And I want the house. It is the marital home. You cannot kick me out of my own home. I have rights. The house, I said. You want the house? Yes, she said. It is the least you can do after putting me through this. I looked at Mr. Stein. He was smiling. It was a small, cold smile. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a blue file folder. He didn't hand it to me. He handed it to Camille. What is this? She asked, taking it with trembling hands. Open it, I said. She opened the folder. She scanned the first page, her brow furrowed. This is a deed, she said, from 20 years ago, when we transferred the house to my brother Marcus. Keep reading, I said. She flipped the page. Marcus sold it, she murmured. 2 months later. He sold it to Blue Heron Holdings. She looked up at me, confused. We did that for tax purposes, Thad, she said. You remember? The IRS was auditing your company. I told you we needed to protect the house. I told you to put it in Marcus's name so they couldn't seize it. And then Marcus sold it to a shell company to keep it safe. You told me you manage Blue Heron Holdings. I shook my head. No, Camille. You told me to transfer it to Marcus because you were planning to leave me back then too. You thought if it was in your brother's name you could kick me out during the divorce. But Marcus was a gambler just like your daughter. He needed cash. He sold the house to the first LLC that made an offer. So what? She snapped. You bought it back. You run Blue Heron Holdings. It is your shell company. That makes it a marital asset. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city. I do not own Blue Heron Holdings, Camille. I never did. Then who does she demanded? The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was not wearing a uniform. She was not wearing the gray apron she had worn every day for 18 years. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that fit her perfectly. She wore a hat with a wide brim and carried a leather handbag. She walked with her head held high, her spine straight. It was Mrs. Etta. Camille looked at her. She frowned. Etta, she barked. What are you doing here? Who told you to come here? Go home and clean up the mess in the kitchen. Etta didn't stop walking. She walked right past Camille. She walked past Hunter and Jasmine. She walked up to the mahogany table. I said go home, Camille shrieked. Do you hear me? You are the help. You do not belong in a boardroom. Etta stopped. She turned slowly to face Camille. She didn't look down. She looked Camille dead in the eye. I am not the help, Camille, Etta said. Her voice was calm, measured, and dignified. Not anymore. What are you talking about? Camille scoffed. Thad, tell her to leave. She is embarrassing herself. She owns it, I said. Camille froze. What? Blue Heron Holdings, I said. The company that bought the house from your brother 20 years ago. It belongs to Mrs. Etta Washington. Camille's mouth fell open. She looked from me to Etta and back again. She laughed a high, nervous sound. That is ridiculous. She is a maid. She doesn't have any money. She had money, I said. Her husband had a life insurance policy. A good one. When your brother put the house on the market for quick cash, Etta came to me. She wanted to invest. She wanted to help me save my home. So she bought it, and she leased it back to me for $1 a year. I looked at Etta. She smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile. For 20 years, I continued, you have treated this woman like furniture. You yelled at her. You made her scrub floors on her knees. You made her eat in the laundry room. You didn't even know her last name. You thought she was serving you. but for 20 years you have been living in her house. You have been sleeping under her roof." Camille turned pale. She started to shake. "No," she whispered. "That is not possible. It is a trick. It is a deed," Mr. Stein said. He tapped the folder in Camille's hand. "Look at the signature on the incorporation papers. Etta Washington, sole proprietor." Camille dropped the folder. It hit the floor with a slap. "So the house," she whispered, "is mine?" Etta said. Etta reached into her handbag. She pulled out a heavy ring of keys. The keys to the front door. The keys to the back door. The keys to the garage. She tossed them onto the polished mahogany table. The metal slid across the wood and stopped right in front of Camille. "I have watched you for 18 years, Camille," Etta said. "I watched you spend this man's money. I watched you ignore him. I watched you plot against him. I cooked your food. I washed your clothes. I raised your daughter while you were at the spa. And I kept my mouth shut. Because Mr. Thad asked me to. Because he loved you." She took a step closer to Camille. "But you broke his heart. And then you tried to stop his heart." Etta leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried to every corner of the room. "I gave you 18 years to be decent. I gave you 18 years to be kind. I gave you 18 years to treat me like a human being. But you used up all your chances." Etta pointed a manicured finger at the door. "You are evicted, Camille. You and your children. I want you out of my house. You have 1 hour to pack your bags. Anything left after 60 minutes goes to the curb for the trash collectors." But Camille stammered. "My clothes, my jewelry, my furs." "Your jewelry belongs to the estate to pay for your legal defense," Stein interjected. "Your furs are likely considered proceeds of fraud given the credit card theft. I suggest you pack warm socks. Prison is cold." Camille looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She looked for a way out. She saw Hunter in handcuffs. She saw Jasmine weeping. She saw me standing with my back to the window untouchable. And she saw Etta, the woman she had scorned, holding the power of a landlord and a judge. "Please," Camille whispered. "Thad. Etta, where will I go?" "I don't know," Etta said. "And frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." Etta turned to me. "Are we done here, Mr. Thad?" "We are done, Etta," I said. "Let's go," she said. "I have to call a locksmith. I am changing the locks at noon." She turned and walked out of the boardroom. She didn't look back. She walked with the rhythm of a queen who had just reclaimed her kingdom. I looked at the agents. "Get them out of here," I said. The agents hauled Hunter and Jasmine to their feet. They dragged them towards the door. Camille stood frozen for a moment longer, staring at the keys on the table. Then with a wail of despair, she ran after them, chasing the police escort, terrified of being left behind, terrified of being alone in a world she no longer owned. The room emptied. Silence returned. I stood there for a long time. I looked at the keys Etta had thrown. I looked at the Mont Blanc pen Hunter had dropped. It was over. The lie was over. Mr. Stein closed his briefcase with a snap. "That went well," he said. "Yes," I said. "It did." I walked out of the boardroom. I walked past the receptionist who was now typing furiously on her phone. I walked into the elevator. I had one more stop to make, one final piece of business, and then I had a plane to catch. The boardroom was clearing out, but the air was still vibrating with the violence of the arrests. The federal agents were efficient machines moving with a practiced rhythm that offered no room for negotiation or escape. They hauled Hunter up from the table where they had pinned him. His face was pressed against the mahogany, leaving a smear of sweat and grease on the finish I had polished myself for 20 years. He was red-faced and sputtering, struggling against the metal cuffs that bit into his wrists. He looked at me with eyes that were no longer human. They were the eyes of a cornered animal, wild and uncomprehending. "You cannot do this to me, Thaddeus," he screamed, his voice cracking and raw. "Do you know who I am? I have friends. I have connections in this city. I will sue you for everything you have. I will bury you in litigation until you are begging for mercy." I walked over to him, stopping just outside of spitting distance. I looked at this man who had come into my home, who had eaten at my table, who had slept in my bed. He was wearing my suit, but he had never looked smaller. "You have no friends, Hunter," I said, my voice low and steady. "You have accomplices, and they are all going to prison just like you. And as for connections, the only connection you have left is with the federal penitentiary system." Hunter thrashed in the grip of the agents. He spat on the floor, a glob of saliva landing near my shoe. "I was going to fix this place," he hissed. "I was going to make it classy. I was going to erase your tacky legacy and build something real. I was going to gentrify this whole company." I smiled. It was a cold expression that didn't reach my eyes. Gentrify. That was his favorite word. He used it like a weapon. He used it to describe erasing the history of neighborhoods. He used it to describe pricing people out of their own homes. He used it to describe painting over the soul of a place with a coat of beige paint. He wanted to take the black excellence I had built, the grit and the sweat and the history, and sanitize it for a market that didn't care about where we came from. "You wanted to gentrify my assets?" I asked, leaning in close so only he could hear the steel in my voice. "You wanted to whitewash my name. Well, son, I have news for you. I just gentrified you right out of human society. You are evicted. Permanently." Hunter stared at me, his mouth working silently. The reality of his situation finally crashed down on him. He wasn't going to be a developer. He wasn't going to be a CEO. He was going to be an inmate. The agents shoved him forward, marching him towards the door. He tried to dig his heels into the carpet, but he was powerless against their momentum. He was dragged out, still screaming threats that no one was listening to anymore. I turned to Jasmine. She was standing by the window, held by another agent. She wasn't screaming. She was weeping silent, hitching sobs that shook her whole body. She looked at me, and for a second I saw the little girl who used to wait for me on the porch steps when I came home from work. But that little girl was gone. She had been replaced by a woman who would sell her father to a loan shark to save her own skin. Mr. Stein stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Jasmine King," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "In addition to the charges of conspiracy and elder abuse, we have completed a forensic audit of the company accounts this morning. It appears you have been siphoning funds from the operational budget for 18 months. $300,000 disguised as vendor payments to shell companies registered in your name. That is corporate embezzlement. That is grand larceny." Jasmine's knees buckled. The agent had to hold her up to keep her from collapsing to the floor. "I was going to pay it back," she whispered. "I just needed a lucky streak." "I was going to put it all back, Daddy, I swear. You stole from the men and women who built this company," I said. "You stole from the workers who pour concrete in the rain. You stole their pensions. You stole their safety equipment budget. You didn't just steal from me, Jasmine. You stole from families." "Take her," I said to the agent. Jasmine didn't fight. She let them lead her away, her head hanging low, her blonde hair falling forward to hide her face. She walked past her mother without looking at her. She walked out of the room and out of my life. Now there was only Camille. She stood near the head of the table, clutching her purse with white-knuckled hands. She wasn't handcuffed. The agents had left her alone for the moment, focusing on the immediate flight risks. She stood there in the silence of the empty boardroom, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. She looked around the room, realizing she was the last one left. Her allies were gone. Her children were gone. Her plan was dust. "Thad," she breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," I said. She froze. Her lower lip trembled. "They are gone, Thad," she whispered. "They took our babies. They took criminals, Camille," I corrected her. "And they missed one." She flinched. "You are not going to send me to jail, are you?" she asked, her voice small and childlike. "I am your wife. We have been together 40 years. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared. Hunter said it was the only way. He said you were sick. He said you were suffering." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had shared a life with. I remembered the day we met at a church picnic. I remembered the way she used to laugh. I remembered the way she held my hand when the doctor told us we couldn't conceive naturally. And then I remembered the storage room. I remembered the smell of bitter almonds in the tea. I remembered her watching me fall and saying nothing. "You watched me die, Camille," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "You thought I was dying on that concrete floor and you didn't call for help. You worried about the rug. You worried about the timeline. But you didn't worry about me. That is not fear. That is evil." She started to cry. Ugly, racking sobs. "Please, Thad, I have nowhere to go. This is my life too. You cannot just throw me out on the street. I am an old woman." I walked over to the corner of the room where I had left a small carry-on suitcase. It was the same cheap, battered suitcase I had packed 3 days ago when I fled my own house. The same suitcase I had taken to Happy Acres. I picked it up. It felt light. I walked back to Camille. I placed the suitcase on the table in front of her. "What is this?" she asked, wiping her eyes. I opened it. Inside there was a single change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a white envelope. "This is what you left me with, Camille," I said. "When you sent me to that warehouse to rot, you sent me with nothing. You took my dignity. You took my home. You took my name." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I took out 5 $100 bills. I placed them on top of the clothes in the suitcase. $500, I said. "That is what you get." What, she gasped, staring at the money. "You want a settlement?" I asked. "This is it. $500. That is more than you gave me when you signed that commitment order." "Thad, you cannot be serious," she wailed. $500. That won't even pay for a hotel for 2 nights. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to eat?" "I don't know, Camille," I said. "Maybe you can find a job. Maybe you can find someone else to leech off of. Or maybe you can go to the Pines. I hear they have vacancies." She stared at me in horror. She realized I was serious. She realized that the luxury, the comfort, the safety net she had taken for granted for 40 years was gone. It had been severed with the same finality as a guillotine blade. Mr. Stein stepped forward. "Mrs. King," he said formally, "the locks on the house have been changed. Your access to the bank accounts has been permanently revoked. Your credit cards have been canceled. The car in the parking lot has been repossessed by the leasing company. You are trespassing on private property. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before I ask the security team to escort you out." Camille looked from Stein to me. She looked for a crack in my armor. She looked for the husband who had always forgiven her, who had always given her what she wanted. She found only a stranger. "Thad, please," she whispered one last time. I closed the suitcase. I zipped it shut. I pushed it towards her. "Goodbye, Camille." She took the handle of the suitcase. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and despair. "I hope you rot in hell, Thaddeus King," she spat. "I am already in hell, Camille," I said calmly, "but at least I am the one holding the pitchfork now." She turned and walked out. She walked slowly, dragging the suitcase behind her. She looked small and frail. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had gambled everything on greed and lost. I waited until she was gone. I waited until the sound of her footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I turned to Stein. "Is it done?" I asked. "It is done," Stein said. "The deed is transferred. Mrs. Etta is the legal owner of the house. The company is secure in the trust. The accounts are locked down." "Good," I said. I adjusted my jacket. I checked my reflection in the darkened glass of the window. I looked tired. I looked older than my 68 years. But I looked free. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked down the hall past the weeping receptionist who was now typing a resume. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors slid open. I stepped inside. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors began to close, I saw Camille at the end of the hallway. She was standing by the reception desk arguing with the security guard who was blocking her path back to the offices. She turned and saw me. Our eyes met through the narrowing gap. She reached out a hand towards me, her mouth opening in a silent scream of my name. I didn't blink. I didn't wave. I just watched her. The doors slid shut, cutting her off from my view, cutting her off from my world. The silence of the elevator enveloped me. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The morning sun hit the brick facade of the house on Elm Street, turning the dew on the lawn into 1,000 scattering diamonds. It was a Tuesday exactly 1 week since the federal agents had marched my family out of the boardroom in handcuffs. I stood on the sidewalk, my hands deep in the pockets of my trench coat, watching the house. For 40 years, this structure had been the center of my universe. I knew every shim in the door frames. I knew exactly how the plumbing ran behind the drywall in the master bath. I had laid the pavers for the driveway with my own hands, kneeling in the wet cement until my knees bruised. It was a beautiful house. It stood proud and sturdy, a testament to quality craftsmanship in a world of cheap veneers. But as I looked at it now, I felt nothing. The emotional tether that had bound me to this place for 4 decades had been severed. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building, a container for memories that were rapidly turning to dust. I saw the window of the study where Hunter had drilled into my safe. I saw the window of the kitchen where Jasmine had poured champagne to celebrate my demise. I saw the small, high window of the storage room where Camille had watched me fall. Those ghosts were trapped in there, but I was out here, and the air on the sidewalk tasted sweeter than the air inside ever had. The front door opened. Mrs. Etta stepped out onto the porch. She wasn't wearing her gray uniform. She was wearing a floral sundress and a wide-brimmed straw hat. She held a pair of gardening shears in one hand. She looked different. She stood taller. Her shoulders, usually hunched from years of scrubbing floors and carrying trays, were squared. She looked like the lady of the house. She saw me standing by the gate and set the shears down on the porch railing. She walked down the driveway to meet me. Her gait was steady. She didn't rush. She didn't look down. "Mr. Thad," she said when she reached me. "Mrs. Etta," I replied. We stood there for a moment in silence, two survivors of a shipwreck standing on the shore. "The house is quiet," she said. "It is the first time in 18 years I have heard the birds singing without the television blaring or someone shouting for coffee." "It suits you, Etta," I said. "Silence suits you," she smiled. It was a small, shy smile. "I found some of your things in the study," she said. "Your drafting compass, the picture of your mother. I put them in a box by the door. Do you want to come in and get them?" I looked past her at the open front door. I could see the foyer. I could see the grand staircase where Hunter had planned to push me. "No," I said softly. "I don't want them. My mother is in my heart, not in a picture frame. And I am done drafting." I reached into my coat pocket. The metal was cold and heavy against my palm. I pulled out the master key ring. It was a chaotic jumble of brass and steel. The key to the front door, the key to the back door, the key to the garage, the key to the wine cellar, the key to the safe room. Every lock I had installed to keep the world out. I held them out to her. "Here," I said. Etta looked at the keys. She wiped her hands on her dress, a reflex from years of service, before reaching out. She took them. Her fingers brushed mine. Her skin was rough, calloused from hard work. "You are sure, Mr. Thad?" she asked. "This is your legacy. You built this." "I built the walls, Etta," I corrected her. "You built the home. You were the one who put Band-Aids on Jasmine's knees when she fell. You were the one who made soup when Camille was sick. You were the one who polished the wood and watered the plants. You put more love into this house in a week than they did in a lifetime." I took a deep breath. "Besides, I added the legal transfer is complete. The deed is recorded in the county clerk's office. Blue Heron Holdings is yours. The house is yours. The contents are yours. Do whatever you want with it. Live in it, sell it, burn it down. It is your property." Etta closed her hand around the keys. She squeezed them tight. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She was a strong woman. "I won't burn it," she said. "I am going to paint the kitchen yellow. I always hated that gray color Camille picked out. It looked like a prison." "Yellow sounds good," I said. "Yellow is cheerful." She looked at me, her eyes searching my face. "Where will you go?" she asked. I smiled. "I am going to catch a flight," I said. "I have a vacation to take. A long one." "You take care of yourself, Thaddeus King," she said fiercely. "You eat properly. Don't skip meals. And take your blood pressure medicine." "I promise," I said. I turned away. I walked towards the black sedan waiting at the curb. The driver, a young man in a dark suit, opened the rear door for me. I paused before getting in. I looked back one last time. Etta was standing in the driveway, clutching the keys to her chest. She raised one hand in a wave. I nodded. Then I ducked into the car and closed the door. "To the airport, please," I told the driver. The car pulled away. I watched the house disappear in the side mirror. The brick, the trees, the woman standing in the sun. It shrank until it was just a speck, and then we turned a corner and it was gone. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel a sense of loss. I felt like a diver coming up for air after being held underwater for too long. My lungs expanded. My heart slowed. The tension that had lived in my shoulders for years evaporated. The airport was a hive of activity. Travelers rushing announcements, blaring the smell of jet fuel and coffee. I moved through it with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't stressed. I walked past the long lines at economy check-in. I walked past the frazzled families and the shouting businessmen. I went straight to the private terminal. Mr. Stein had arranged everything. The charter jet was waiting on the tarmac, gleaming white under the midday sun. It was a Gulfstream G650, a machine built for speed and luxury. I walked up the stairs. The flight attendant, a woman with a professional smile, greeted me at the door. "Welcome aboard, Mr. King," she said. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" "Champagne," I said. "A bottle. And a glass." I settled into the wide leather seat. It was softer than any chair in my house. The interior of the plane was quiet, insulated from the noise of the world. I looked out the round window. I saw the baggage handlers loading luggage. I saw a commercial jet taxiing in the distance. I thought about Jasmine. I thought about the tag on her bag. Mail Maldives. She had lied to me. She had used my money to book a first-class trip to paradise while she plotted to put me in a cage. She had wanted the white sand and the turquoise water. She had wanted the luxury without the labor. Now she was in a holding cell in the county jail. She was trading her Louis Vuitton for an orange jumpsuit. She was trading the Maldives for a court date. And me. I was the one sitting on the jet. The flight attendant returned with a silver bucket and a crystal flute. She popped the cork. The sound was a sharp, festive crack. She poured the wine. The bubbles danced in the glass, rising to the surface in a golden stream. I picked up the glass. I held it up to the light. To retirement, I whispered. But it wasn't retirement. Not really. Retirement was what they wanted for me. Retirement was fading away. Retirement was sitting in a chair and waiting for the end. This was not retirement. This was a renaissance. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "We are cleared for takeoff, Mr. King. Next stop, Valana International Airport, Maldives. Flight time is approximately 18 hours. Sit back and relax." The engines roared, a deep, powerful vibration that traveled through the floor and into my bones. The plane began to move. We gathered speed. The runway blurred. The buildings blurred. I felt the lift. That moment when gravity loses its grip and you break the bonds of the earth. We climbed, steep and fast. The city of Atlanta spread out below me like a circuit board. I saw the skyscrapers I had helped build. I saw the highways I had paved. I saw the sprawling suburbs where I had lived my life. From this height, it all looked small. The betrayal, the pain, the anger. It was all down there, shrinking with every second. I reached into the breast pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a pair of sunglasses. They were aviators, gold-rimmed with dark lenses. I had bought them 20 years ago and never wore them because Camille said they made me look like a gangster. I put them on. The world turned a cool, shaded amber. I leaned back in the seat. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold and dry and tasted of victory. People say that 70 is the end. They say it is the winter of life. They say you should be winding down, settling your affairs, making peace with your mortality. They say you become invisible. They are wrong. 70 is not the end. 70 is when you finally have the experience to know who is lying to you. 70 is when you have the patience to wait for the right moment to strike. 70 is when you realize that you don't have to carry the dead weight of people who don't love you. I wasn't winding down. I was just getting started. I had cleaned house. I had excavated the rot. I had poured a new foundation. I looked out at the clouds. They were white and fluffy, stretching out to the horizon like a field of snow. I was going to an island in the Indian Ocean. I was going to sit on a beach. I was going to fish. I was going to read books. I was going to meet new people who didn't know my name or my bank balance, and maybe, just maybe, I would build something new, a small house on the beach, just for me. No mahogany paneling, no marble floors, just wood and glass and light. A smile spread across my face. It wasn't the polite smile I had worn for years to keep the peace. It wasn't the fake smile I had used to fool Hunter. It was a real smile. A smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. I was Thaddeus King. I was alive. I was free. And I was flying. The screen of the world outside faded to a brilliant, blinding white as we punched through the cloud layer and into the sun. Fade to black. My story taught me a painful but necessary truth. Generosity without boundaries is not love. It is self-destruction. I spent 40 years building a legacy for people who only saw me as an obstacle between them and a bank account. I thought providing for them was my duty, but I was merely feeding their greed until it consumed their humanity. The hardest lesson was accepting that shared blood does not guarantee loyalty. True family are the people who stand by you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Never let anyone convince you that your time is over or that you are too old to fight back. Your dignity is the one asset no one can ever steal unless you let them. If you enjoyed watching Justice Be Served, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of redemption. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven them or did they get exactly what they deserved?